the genesis behind this is, as you know, a long time ago when we were all early in our careers. I think in 2015 we started the DCAC Data Center Anti-Conference here in Austin, and we refer to it as DCAC Live. That's the website for it, and that was just a live show. It happens once a year, and we didn't do it because we felt like the industry needed another data center conference. We felt like the industry needed a better one, and we felt that if we created a better environment and invited some folks that aren't on the normal data center conference tracks and introduced new people to it, we could have an environment that created a better exchange for ideas. And we had no idea what we were doing, clearly, right? I mean, I forget where each one of you guys were at. You were probably still Rosendin, obviously, but, you know, I probably won first place against you in more job shifts in those, 3 years. I think I'm like a champion or something like that at that. But the thing is we didn't know what kind of impact we were going to make. And then obviously 7 years later, we just had DCAC again last year. And despite this pandemic and all the concerns, we still had a large amount of people that showed up. One of the themes that has always come to me from DCAC was there would always be two complaints. One was we didn't get to hear from that person long enough, because even if they're on a 45-minute panel, they're going to share airtime, right? So we went to individual speakers thinking that would solve some of the problem. We introduced new speakers, not folks as much that are on the side of the industry that are building these data centers, but on the enterprise end user side. And even then, we still would have people that were like, we need more, like more cowbell. So we looked at a lot of options. Man, I looked at data center DC, like DC-DC, DCCA, thought we'd make a show in California, and DCCC for Chicago. And then I realized the industry didn't need another conference. It just needed more involvement with the celebrities of that industry. So every industry has their celebrities. Like you probably know who LeBron James is, but you don't know anything about him. And you probably knew who Steve Jobs is, but you probably don't know anything about him, unless you watched his movie or a documentary, right? Or for us, this is an industry that has its own celebrities, and I think that a lot of people don't know anything about them. They know who people are. They could read their stats like anything else. Hey, they built these facilities, or they put this many points on the board, but they just don't know your stories, right? So what I found was in the 7 years of DCAC is that what people really gravitated to wasn't the things that the people were talking about in terms of what they were doing and how they were doing it. What really drew people in was when you had people get up and talk about why they did things, and that radiated a completely different energy. It created this really amazing orbit around the event, and then again there was this big push to have more omnipresence at DCAC. Well, for us, rather than dilute that brand or dilute that one event or that experience that happens once a year, the Revolutional podcast was started, right? So it was something that we thought about in November. So what's a revolution? So traditionally, the revolution is when there's some sort of fight for change. And I felt like what the industry needed was a change in which we engaged our industry celebrities. And we started with trying to transform the engagement model. So like if you go online right now to Spotify or Apple Music, there's really only 4 different podcasts dedicated to data centers, which is awkward if you consider how massive of an impact data centers have on the rest of everybody else in the world. It's just behind the green curtain of Oz, and a lot of people don't understand what a data center is and what it does, and because of that, they don't understand how to get into this space. My objective with this was to answer the needs that our customers at DCAC were starving for, which was more context. I want to go more in detail. Like, I want to know more about him. How did he do that? That inspires me to want to do that. How did she get into that? Why did she go there next? Now there's hope for me. I could do the same. Do you understand? So I think for us, I started with like where I began, and then really I didn't have anything, not that I'm doing anything significant now, but I didn't even start, my wheels were spinning the entire time until I probably got into a middle part of my career where we were all bumping into each other early on and doing hallway races and stuff, and, going to these trade shows, and meeting all kinds of other people. And then we just kind of fell more in love with this space as a byproduct of those people. So if you think about it right now, some of my best friends, I keep in touch with guys I wrestled with all throughout high school, guys that I served with in the military. But some of my best friends are in this space. And this industry has had a huge impact on my life and the way that I view everything else in my life. So to that end, I'm not going to say that I don't want you guys to talk about what you guys do for a living, but I do want to start at the beginning, right? So I think this is the revolutionary shift that we can make to introduce more people in the industry that are aware of who we are and what we're doing, but they don't know where to start, right? So if you, this podcast is for those people that are going to listen to it for the first time that have never been in this industry. Like, why the hell would they want to? When there's a lot of other very mature industries out there, manufacturing, retail, energy, finance, et cetera. This is the mission critical vertical or data center industry. I mean, it's so niche. There's no industry that reinvents itself as aggressively as ours, which is why I think this constant steady stream of contact versus the traditional vehicles which are traditionally very static, right? Like a website post or a white paper. And I think there's a room for that. But I think if we can inject stuff like this, we could get people that are working out at 6 a.m. and need an hour to kill, and they're done listening to whatever music, and now they can learn a little bit about our industry or a little bit about something who moves the needle in our industry, and they can chart their own course or find their own path. Does that make sense? How amazing would it have been if when we knuckleheads we just landed to the island of misfit toys and someone's like, look, just go figure out how to make this all work or what your role is. And you're like, where do I begin? You know, and
yeah, a little bit of a roadmap would have been nice, right?
Yeah. I wish I had
would have
someone
saved
giving
us a lot of brain damage.
Literally brain damage. So this is the deal. I want you guys to start by introducing yourselves, right? Let the listeners who are going to follow us know who you guys are. And then I'm just going to scratch the paint a little bit on your background and figure out like, well, how did you get into this space? Right now, obviously, we've known each other and vacation with our families as you know, and I know probably more than most people do about you. And there's some people that probably know more, but there's a lot of people know who you guys are, but they may admire you, but they don't know how to become that. How do you become a big country or Justin Tinocco or Posh Spice or whatever the nickname du jour is today for us? But how do you become that, right? Because you have an amazing story. Your story is pretty amazing. And I think that if people hear your stories, I think it may not only empower them, but it'll inspire them to one day be in a position in which they could effectively drive change throughout this vertical as well. So to that end, why don't you go first? Name, rank, serial number.
So first of all, great to see you boys. It's so few and far between.
Salute.
Thanks for the Blantons in the
Dixie Cup.
I already drank mine, so I'm ahead of you.
There's a whole bottle.
It's so far away.
It's a 2-hour podcast. You better settle down.
So yeah, I'm Laramie Doris. As you guys know, I'm vice president of design and construction for Yondr Group. Only started this position about 10 months ago, but again, it's a pleasure to be here. Always good to see you guys. They're so few and far between, especially in person when I get to thank you guys for both the past and future, lost brain cells that I typically tend to encounter when I'm with you guys. So love you both, and thanks for, inviting me to be here on this initial podcast. For me, if I go way back to when it really started, I'll be 40 next month, and I got into this space roughly when I was around 18 years old. My path was a little different. Grew up on a decent sized farm in North Texas, and I really wasn't into college. I really didn't have the means to go to college. Basically just did everything that I could to just get by in school. I love sports. I learned very early on that I had kind of a leadership capability. Like, people would follow me even if I was doing stuff I shouldn't be doing or vice versa. And with that, I was working at a bank in high school my senior year. I worked with a lady, and her husband was working as the GM for this communications company. And that was around 2000. And the dot-com bubble had just basically, started, if you will.
How old were you then?
18.
So you're 18. You're in North Texas, dot-com bubble, and you're working for, it's like a communications company. Was it a big one? Or?
No, I was working for a bank, and I worked with a woman. Her husband was the GM of a communications company. And I was talking to her about like, you know, what they do, what they did, you know, what the job, what he did for a living.
Yeah.
And she kind of explained to me, and I thought, man, like that sounds really interesting. And she's like, but listen, they can't find good people because you got to travel every week, and it's just tough to find good people that want to be on the road every week. So 18 years old, I just graduated. I graduated high school. 38 kids in my graduating class. Ooh, big school. I mean, Whopper. I mean, tiny Texas town, 2A.
You finished about 37th in that graduating class.
Roughly like 34th. Literally. Yeah, people tease me. I'm like, listen, like I know, like I did just enough to get through it. Loved school, didn't like necessarily the school work. Loved the social interaction, loved the sports, and did just enough to get by. But anyhow, I went to work, graduated high school, took a week off, went to Cancun with all my friends, had a blast, and everybody else was either getting ready to go to the military, had the summer off, getting ready to go to college, and I went to work that Monday. Fortunate for me, I was working with a bunch of like older retired like Western Electric and GE guys that were working as consultants and subcontractors now for the phone company to install all of this, DC power plant equipment.
Oh, yeah, I remember those days.
And different things throughout all the central phone offices throughout Oklahoma. So I just kind of got in there and just, listened more than I talked. Learned the trade, learned about everything related to, communications, equipment, like you name it. And within about, 8 months, I worked my way up to like a lead installer. And, about a year and a half, 2 years in, like I was leading, crews, multiple crews, throughout the entire region.
What was the region? Was it just like North Texas, all of Texas, the Midwest?
Only Oklahoma. So the company I was working for was the cluster vendor for.
Because you live in southern Oklahoma, right? That's where you're born and raised?
Close. I could smell Oklahoma on a windy day. Lake
Right.
Texoma. So
Yeah.
I'm on the good side, which is the southern portion.
Now, listen, you were a football player in high school, right?
Long time ago.
But when you showed up to this job, were you lean and mean? Were you like,
No, actually, I was large and in charge, and not in a good way.
Did you have long hair?
I had longer hair. The thing was, I didn't have a receding hairline back then, so I did grow my hair out some. But the second half of my senior year, like after football, like you just drop athletics. You got, I'm not going to run track. I'm not playing basketball. Like, so I got out half a day, which is what permitted me to work at the bank the other half of the day, which is what led me to this job. But what that also led to was about 30 or 40 pounds that
for sure.
I otherwise wouldn't have gained if I was still active. So, yeah, I didn't get the job because of my looks back then.
Well, listen, I think that every one of us at some point probably transcends our industry alone, but at certain stages in your career, you give up your health to make money. And then you ultimately just spend money to try to regain your health, right? So, like, that's the cycle we all start at. I know I've been there.
Definitely.
Right? Once or twice.
I'm about ready to start it again, man.
Yeah.
So you went from that one. How did you end up with hooking up like Fava Beans and John and all those guys?
So what happened was I did that for about 3.5 years. And then I was approached by an electrical contractor to basically to start the technology division, be the GM of the technology division of an electrical company that was trying to get more into low voltage and data centers, as that stuff, like data centers were starting to become more of a thing. And like, MDFs, main equipment rooms in hospitals, high rises, schools, networking, copper, fiber, like all of that was starting to take more shape and become something more than just a broom closet with a, a little remote cabinet in it. So I did that for a couple of years.
What was the electrical contractor?
RTS Enterprises, small shop.
Still around? Or?
Yeah, they're around. Small shop, local shop, great company, great experience at the time. I didn't have to travel as much, which was nice. And so what happened was I was in some training in Pennsylvania, and I ended up meeting a guy, really nice guy, had owned a consulting business out of New York. And we hit it off. We were friends, shared lunch a couple times, a couple Yinglings, my introduction to Yingling back then in Pennsylvania. And we just kept in touch. And he said, he called me, I don't know, probably a year later. and just said, "Hey, my brother works for this company called Bear Stearns, and they're looking for someone in Texas. Do you mind if I give them your name? Are you interested?" I'm like, "Sure, I'm interested."
What was it for? Did you even say?
He didn't say. He just said they need someone to look after the data centers in the southwestern region.
How big were the data centers then? Were they in kilowatts still, or were they?
Now they were in megawatts, but they weren't big. We're talking like 5 meg chunks, like
That's
five.
big back then.
Massive back then.
Yeah.
Okay, because hold on, you were like, this is 21, 22-ish for you now, right?
Yes, I would have been 20. I think when I got the job, I was 25.
So 15 years ago. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess they were still big data centers back then.
Like now they'd be considered just a main equipment room, right? But by default back then, I guess they were decent size. So he says, "Hey, you got to meet the managing director. He's going to fly down from New York." And I said, "Sure." So where do I show up? I show up, and this guy shows up, John Hayden, and he's in Louisville, Texas.
And he was what was he?
At the time, he was the managing director over data center engineering globally for Bear Stearns.
Did he have hair back then?
No hair, hair back then.
Oh, shit.
So, and he was young as well. I was 25, so that made him 32. And he had been there like for several years already as well.
No kidding.
Yeah, Bear Stearns was a great place. So
John's got a cool story though too. We got to get him on here. He told me once. I don't want to tell his story on he's got to hear, but how he got into some shit too. He had a pretty
punching
story.
Cables. That's always the common joke between me and him is long way from punching cables. He was punching cables.
You were doing the same, right?
Doing the same. So, got lucky. Like we went across the street for lunch. Had a cocktail, Twin Peaks. That was the first one that was open in Louisville. And offered me the job, and that was where it all kind of started. So, unfortunately, we were taking over the world. Don't get me wrong, we were the 5th largest investment bank in the world at the time, which happens to be the smallest of the big 5. But we were scrappy, like young, fun, like great bank, just a great company to work for. But unfortunately, that came to an end in 2008. So.
Did you have any advance notice too? They were like, "Hey, listen."
Over the weekend, they said like Monday may or may not have a job. I mean, we think we'll have.
But there was no other on the radar knowledge that like, "Hey, man, we're gonna play Dr. Kevorkian with you maybe on Monday."
No, it was really like stay close to your phone, and it was really interesting. Like, for what it's worth, like we knew that the banks had to stay open, and we knew kind of on Sunday because obviously, Asia was ahead, right? Hours. So something had to get sorted out over the weekend, and it eventually did. Who knows whether it was considered a good outcome or not. I was offered a position to stay on as the VP of data center engineering and global technology infrastructure. And at the time, that's when I met Vince Fava. Like he was my boss's boss's boss at the time.
So that was Hayden. He was too above Hayden.
Well, not really. They hadn't integrated us yet, but that's what he was at the bank that bought us.
And how long was he there for? He's former Army. He was there for a long time, I thought.
He was originally, I think, chemical bank guy. So he was already at the bank 20 years plus by the time they acquired us. So, stayed there a couple years.
And the post Bear Stearns era, you were there for 2 years. And who was that? That was
2 years, I think.
But which one was it? Chase? Who acquired them?
So J.P. Morgan Chase.
Yeah. And then, so you worked for J.P. Morgan Chase for those 2 years.
Yeah, and it was great. Listen, like big company. Like I got a ton of corporate experience that I otherwise never would have gotten. It was different than Bear Stearns. Like J.P. Morgan Chase was a huge company. They owned a bunch of companies that they had rolled up under one umbrella. They had a ton of different, businesses that they were servicing, which meant a lot more exposure for me to different lines of business and like understanding what various businesses did. And it was just a great exposure to like corporate America, like structure, which was awesome at the time. I mean, I was a young kid, with no degree and nothing but, just grinded out skills. And stayed there a couple years. Me and Hayden were separated at that point.
Was he living in New Jersey still?
He was still in Jersey. He was working in a different program that was still under GTI, and I was in another unit underneath GTI that still based in Dallas.
Now, listen, when you were in that role, though, Were you traveling? I mean, did they have pops all over the place? Were they retail colo facilities or like, carrier hotels?
So I more or less had the Southwestern U.S. initially, and I was a part of a group called Remote Service Operations. And what they did was really look after, what ended up being RSO, which was the smaller sites that were a little more in line with the sites that I was overseeing when I was at Bear, right? They had some key data centers, Carlstadt, New Jersey, GyddiUP in Dallas. They had some big ones in Delaware and some other markets.
So you were traveling all over for those, or at least in your region?
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, met some great people, great experience. Like,
was that your first time traveling though for work?
I traveled for Bear. Bear was the real, like my early mid-20s was my first real experience of like out on the road, away.
Was it like 2 days a week, 5 days a week, get on a Monday through Friday type of thing, or
probably 2 days a week?
That's not bad at all.
It wasn't horrible.
That's actually pretty nice.
Yeah.
Get a little break for a couple of days.
Yeah.
All right, we'll pause on you because I think right from there, is that where you went to go work at Concept for Sean?
It was, yep.
All right, I want to, because that's where we'll true up at, right? Because I met you when you were a super at Concept, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so going back to you, introduce yourself, give these people your background. And
does he actually need an introduction?
I know. It depends in which court you're in. Some courts, they already don't, they got that on lockdown. All right, your turn. Give us some your story.
So hey man, thanks for having us. This is new. This is interesting, huh?
Yeah. Who would have thought when we were just getting started that one day, hey, we're going to try to make a change to this industry ourselves, right? We were just tiny pieces on the cog, the furthest, away from anything that was strategic. We were tactical the whole time, right?
Yeah.
And now here we are trying to figure out how we could help move the needle on big business, right?
Yeah.
So
you came up with the great idea to like memorialize our bar conversations and get it out to the rest of the world, I guess.
I think most of the world, at least in this space, I think people have an understanding. They've probably heard a few of that. Like, who is the reigning champion of hallway racing? Is it me?
Listen, come on.
Hold on. Where were we when you showed up super spicy? You were like ready for anything. Hold on, but you clipped them. You took off your shoes and raced them barefoot or something?
It was the Mirage.
But you clipped them, but there's like if I remember, because I was videoing it, but there was times where I almost blacked out in laughter.
No, Rubbin's racing.
That's right.
Yeah,
who's that video?
There was a service cart in the hallway. I was just trying to save his life. I was trying to save his life.
He was losing to a fat guy, and he pushed me. Listen, I'm. There's
Ass
no
over
rules.
Tea kettle. I remember watching. I was like, I think he just killed him.
I just remember everyone dying in laughter, me falling down.
And then my shoes are gone.
And then a guy comes out at the end of the hall. Hey, quiet down. Like, fuck you. This is Vegas.
Yeah. Where else are you supposed to do that?
Right. Not permitted anywhere else. And yes.
That was a long time
There
ago.
was some, midget fairy that came by and had the same shoe size as him and took his shoes. So
or security.
Or security.
Hey, who needs some loudmouth soup? Everybody, you guys good? Bring double cup in case these little Dixie cups. So one of the funny things here you go, bring it in. Get it while it's hot. I should have brought 2 bottles of this, huh? There was someone that was asking me some question. I mean, because there are times. So listen, the greatest time to be in the military is when you're junior. Like if you're a junior military officer, greatest time because you don't have any responsibility. No one's going to get mad at you or disappointed. You're still in your training phase and
along for the ride,
right? And like I was enlisted, so that junior phase of being a sailor, I remember being brought back to the boat by the shore patrol, and like they didn't handcuff us; they would just zip tie us, right? And I remember like those guys had lived, like all the married guys that have been on that ship for long enough had like kind of lived vicariously enough through us to where they'd be like, okay, so what do you guys do? And I'm like, aren't you supposed to be yelling at me? And I remember getting into parts of this industry where I'm like, how cool is it when like we started going to conferences? You're like, wait a second, I have no idea what that conference is even about, but I do know who's going to be there. And that's where the hallway races began, right? Or things like that. But like, imagine, like as we try to inspire people that are like, I want to get in this industry. That sounds like fun. Like, just wait till the epic hallway races, I guess. But Like, think about the things we got to do early in our career. Right now, you can't. You guys aren't hallway racing anymore. You guys can't do it. You'll break a hip.
Oh,
Well, I don't want to
I'll
say
probably,
that I'm
like, pull my
retired,
cat.
but what I mean, like, if we need to make that like an official event,
Oh, jeez.
I don't remember who's the overall heavyweight champion of the hallway races.
heavyweight, me, as far as being a champion, I don't know.
I don't like.
It was up for grabs that night.
Listen,
I was barefooted too, in my defense.
but you came. Like when he showed up to that conference, you remember like Graham you rented that private place at the Bellagio. Like
I remember I ordered a steak and he like turned.
it was like a
his
$200
nose up.
Wagyu, which I've never seen in my life. And he like picks it up and takes a bite of it like it's a chicken nugget, drops it back down. He's like, and you're like, yeah, we've already passed that point, you know? So when you are talking about your way back into this, and I know that we keep interrupting you, but because I need you to have some more bourbon before you talk. You actually become. I think that we officially like you after you've had a few drinks in you.
Yeah,
But
that's most people.
He looks really good on camera. You see him? Like, he looks really good.
The camera adds.
Look at that.
Uranium, man.
Yeah.
It's funny because when you see him up close, it's glitter everywhere, right? But when you do it on the camera, it's like it takes it all away. It's weird.
Oh, I need to find better friends. I really do.
Tell us your story, brother, because you have a pretty amazing story too. And then when you get to the point where we are all kind of in orbit together, we'll kind of bring that story together.
Yeah. So Justin Tinocco, executive vice president for Rosendin. Man, where to begin? I mean, you go all the way back, and you know, I graduated from high school. There was really never any conversations in my house about, you know, what kind of scholar I was going to be, or what college I was going to go to.
In defense of your parents, I think we can understand why they looked at you and said, "Why bother?"
Yeah. No, listen, I don't judge them, right? I would have done the same.
Probably amazing parents.
But you know, I got out of graduated from high school and was trying to figure out what to do with my life, right? And you know, my dad, I grew up in a construction household. My dad was a general contractor. And I actually, that was
DPR, right?
Yeah, that was actually my first job. My first job was with DPR Construction.
Get out. How big were they then?
Oh, I mean,
Were they
listen,
still like West
I was
Coast
so
only?
far down on the listen, they gave me a hot pink hard hat when I showed up, and that's what I had to wear, right? And it was because my dad, it was like those visitor hard hats, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But no, that was like my everyday go to work hard hat. And I was working for
So many ideas, right?
yeah. And I was working for, you know, the drywall and framing division of DPR back when
their self-performed stuff.
yeah, self-performed stuff.
And what was your dad doing there?
My dad was a superintendent on another job.
Did you work for him or on his team?
No. I never worked for him, you know.
I got you.
But yeah, so
How did he got you on though? Obviously, at DPR.
yeah, I mean, I would assume so,
Okay.
right? You know, joined the union, went through the whole thing, and then he teed up a job for me. So, and I was just trying to figure out what it was. I knew I had to show up to work early, be there every day, and grind it out, and basically do whatever it was that they.
You used to do that?
Yeah.
Did you know that? I never did know that.
Listen,
It's like a whole nother. I feel like I don't know you.
all right, I see how this whole thing's gonna go. All right?
I had a suspicion he wore tools. I just felt like it's been a long time ago.
Hey, you still carry your card, probably, right?
Listen, actually, I do.
Card carrying electrician still? Good for you.
Yes.
So from DPR, you got
so going there, and I just remember, like, you know, I had the glorious job of like putting in the thermofiber, that green insulation, rock wool. You know, that was my last job as a carpenter. Was, you know, this big warehouse, 3/4 inch, 12-foot sheets of drywall, 2 layers, and miles and miles of that rock wool insulation, and just covered in it. And I'm up on this lift dying. You know, those are long days, man. Humping those sheets. Those sheets probably weigh, you know, 120 pounds a sheet, you know, 3/4 inch. It's hard work, and you're grinding out every day, and it's never fast enough, right? Even if you're fast, you're getting yelled at, right?
Yeah.
And I look down and I see this electrician sitting on the bucket.
Now the truth comes out.
Sitting on the bucket.
He was done at noon.
Sitting on the bucket, like putting a
Union
device in. And then I go into like the little admin area, and there's electricians, you know, they're all iron shirts.
Hey,
They
it's
look
too
so classy,
cold in here. Can
right?
you turn the air conditioner down?
Yeah. You know, iron shirts, everything's all, I mean, they just look like, I was like, what do you guys do? And so tried to figure it out. And this one guy, he kind of helped me figure that whole thing out. And
how old was he, like a master electrician, a journeyman? I mean,
yeah, he was a journeyman, right? And so he gave me kind of the roadmap on how to get into the union and what to do and go figure that out. So, my dad thought I was going to be like a carpenter for the rest of my life. And here I am on the back. I'm like, I could only imagine like your body after 20, 30 years. And God bless them. I mean, the world needs carpenters. And
those guys and the masonry guys. Like, I've met guys and they're just built like tanks because their whole body is.
It's an amazing craft. It's absolutely amazing to watch those guys work in the craft they bring to the industry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, it is a craft too.
But it's something that I knew that I just needed to kind of go figure out, right? And I got decent grades in high school, and I it's like, okay, so.
Yeah, listen, when you're carrying sheets of drywall 3 times your height, 12 foot. I mean, that's you figure out pretty quick. Like,
yeah.
Hey, listen, that's an over under. We're only like 15 minutes in the first mid joke. I don't know how this is gonna work.
Well, I beat you guys to the fat jokes. So I figure I've worked a couple in here already. So
yeah, so I ended up getting into the.
How long were you DPR for?
Oh, it was short. I mean, it didn't take me long to figure out that was something that.
Yeah.
It just it didn't excite me, right? It was a job, right? And so got into the IBEW, San Mateo, IBEW 617, went through the apprenticeship there.
So what were the qualifications back then? Like, was it just sign up, like if you can get through it, you can get your card and kind of go from there?
You have to go take, some tests and listen, these tests are, look, I could probably put this test in front of you guys, and I don't know. Let's see. Oh, definitely Kirk. I mean, yeah,
true that.
That would have been a struggle for him. I mean, you work for an electrical contractor, but there's you got to have your high school stuff and
no, there's an aptitude for it. It's a respectable trade. I have a ton of respect for those guys for sure.
But I had no idea. My vision of an electrician was sitting on a bucket with a receptacle. And wiring this stuff up.
And then you said, I want to do that?
And then you realize that how much more is going into it, right?
Pipe, right? I got to
Well, you're the first guy on the job and you're the last guy to leave, right? You're the guy. You're the guy.
As the apprentice, you mean?
You're the guy. No.
As the electrician.
As an electrician, right?
Yeah,
you're in there putting underground in and you're out there doing punch lists at the very end, right? I mean, so, and the criteria for that job, it's, you're in the dirt. Yeah, I mean, the stories I have coming up through the apprenticeship, it's crazy, and it's
you heard the story?
It's life-changing.
Well, hold on. How far along were you in your career when you almost died from the...
Yeah, there's a couple times, unfortunately.
Not in Vegas. I'm talking about like when you were in California and like...
when the shoring came.
Yeah.
Or lack of shoring.
Were you an apprentice?
Yeah, I was actually an apprentice.
You got to tell that story.
Yeah, it was so I was probably a third-year apprentice. I was a third-year apprentice. I wasn't working for Rosendin at the time.
You were not?
I was not. Yeah.
So you got
it was right,
but you were working for a different electrical contractor before you went to Rosendin?
Yeah. A couple. There's this whole program. So
I don't even know this guy.
So yeah, what, you weren't with Rosendin since like birth?
I thought that you had been there forever. All right, so
yeah, I mean, I was working for this other electrical contractor. Guys that I've worked with for a long time, in my 3 years of electrical experience, right? But they were the guys that I've been with for a while, right? You know them, you trust them, super smart guys. And there was this scenario that presented itself as, and we were digging a big old vault for telecommunications, and those vaults get pretty deep, right, LD? Mm-hmm. 12, 14 feet deep, plus rock, plus all that. It was in Northern California. It was on the bay mud, all these things. And it was just, it was a lot of bad decisions, right? There was a lot of bad decisions. So we were supposed to take out this sidewalk and slope this 14-foot hole. And, you're in bay mud, and I mean, you go 2.5, 3 feet down and it's just like black jello, it just stinks. And the sheer fact that they build buildings on that is just amazing, right? But, it's
I wonder if it helps from all the earthquakes, all the fault lines. Where they'll
Hence the piles, right?
Yeah.
But so we go in, the owner changes the plan. Like last minute, we can't take out the sidewalk, which means we already have 3 sides sloped and you just have this big shelf. And the vault's coming and my foreman's feeling pressured and he's just like, let's just get in there real quick. Let's rock it, shoot grade, go do this. And so I'm in the hole, 14 feet deep, setting it. We just shot it. I mean, it's like perfect. You could perfect level, ready to just go receive this. Well, we're building the building and swinging steel at this time. And they got a big conventional crane that's around swinging steel.
It's
When you
so
swing
heavy.
when you swing steel, that weight is
Shifts it,
dispersed,
yeah.
right? And it's like it's a little minor earthquake basically. And it was on the other side of the property. And
How
when
far away?
when we
Just
were
curious, like
when
how-
we were digging, they moved it around. So now it's probably 60 feet from the hole, and they start swinging steel. And so I had a buddy that I knew from high school. He was the backhoe driver, and he was one of those backhoe drivers that was like, the arm comes in and it's like, shaking, and it's not smooth like some of these guys. They can like pick your hat off, or you take those glasses off your head.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even know,
You don't know
right?
anything
He
when
was
you're 21,
he was a
yeah.
rookie, right?
Sure.
He was a rookie, and I had my shovel here. My foreman was right to the right of me. And I hear the backhoe driver say, the last thing I heard him say was, "Look out." And I didn't even hear him finish the T. And it felt like I got hit by a bus. And all I can hear is like some commotion. Everything's muffled. I'm trying to breathe. I can't breathe because there's so much weight on me. I have rock.
Are you the only one that's in that hole at that point?
Me and my foreman were in the hole, but he got out.
Because it was his decision to go in there, right? The foreman.
Yeah. And it
So they
was,
both were-
and he got clipped at the bottom, basically his calf down to an ankle, but he was good, but there's so much dirt. He doesn't even know where I'm at. You can't see any signs.
Were you
that I'm even
fully
there.
buried?
Fully buried.
Yeah, that's right.
Fully buried. And this is all, I mean, I don't know what it looks like. This is all just from, hearing them tell me about it.
Sure.
And just a crazy story. The fire department was like literally a block away. He's trying to dig us out or dig me out, and stuff still slumping into the trench. And, this, I guess it was kind of all this commotion. And the fire department showed up. They won't get in the hole because they're worried about more people, putting their firemen in that line of fire. And they're yelling at my foreman to leave. He's an old Vietnam vet. He's not leaving anybody, right? And and he got my head out, and he thought that I was going to be okay. And I'm kind of like,
Because your head's okay, but the rest of the chest is
but
still
my
compacted,
chest, I can't expand. And so I literally, my face is touching fresh air, and I can't take a breath.
Oh.
It's like this. It's just this crazy. It's hard to describe. It gives me chills and it makes me emotional.
21,
just thinking about it.
22?
I was probably about 21.
21.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Because you can't process that stuff very well at 21.
and then I just go lights out, and the next thing I wake up and I'm in Stanford and getting probed and cracked ribs and all these other things, right? But he never let me.
Your foreman didn't?
And back in the day, construction wasn't the way that it is now. It was kind of, let's go get it done, right? It's a lot safer now. There's a lot more checks and balances. And OSHA came to me, they're trying to like file these charges, and I was just, lawyers, everybody. I was like,
Oh, it's
that
free
guy saved my
to sue
life.
somebody? Yeah.
That guy, he did everything he could do.
Oh, they
and-
wanted you to stack up against the foreman or something in the company?
foreman, the company, the whole thing.
So
right?
what'd you do?
I stayed the course.
Yeah, dude.
Right. You know what? I tried to make it no lost time incident, and
So you're arguing
and
for
I'm
that.
in a wheelchair. I got out of the hospital. I get in a wheelchair the next day, and I get my ass to the job site, because it wasn't even like, hey, we'll pay you from work from home. Like that didn't exist back then. But show up, and it's like one of those things,
You
right?
see, that's GyddiUP.
That's
That's
giddy.
that's giddy up.
Giddy up.
So are you and him still friends to this day? Do you still keep in touch?
You know, it's been a while since I've talked. Last time I talked to him was a couple of years ago. He's retired. You know,
Did you drag him over to Rosendin when you went over there?
so we all left and went to Rosendin.
Okay, so he became
one fell swoop. How I ended up at Rosendin is I'm in the IBW. I'm talking to the training director, and I could just see my life play out like 20 years, kind of like how it was with the Carpenters, right? Like, is this what I want to do? And it was a good, respectable, mid-sized shop, you know, these whole things. But I was like, this is going to be my life. So I talked to the training director and I just said, hey, I've got to get somewhere where I can grow. I said, I don't know what I want to do, but I need more. And he goes, well, what are you trying to tell me? Scotty Turner, right? Bless his heart. He passed away a handful of years ago. But I said, I need more. I said, I got to quit, or I got to figure out.
You need more, like you need a bigger company?
I just need more opportunity. I wanted more opportunity. I wasn't settled. I have a very short time frame, right? I get bored real quick.
How long have you been at Rosendin?
I've been at Rosendin for almost 21 years. But I think it's a testament to yeah, like
how old he is.
Kirk's probably had like 15 jobs.
Maybe 18. Yeah, that's
I
about
was just
right.
wondering.
But I have a short time frame.
You
But I think it's a testament to what this industry can provide, right? If you figure it out. And so
That's what I want to get to.
electricians, you know, you're in the IBW, you can't quit your job. You quit your job, you get brought in front of the e-board. There's going to be this whole process, right? And you could get potentially removed from the apprenticeship program.
How long is that program, by the way?
5 years. 5 years.
Oh.
And so I'm over halfway in.
Do you have to stay the whole 5 years at the same place?
No. They rotate.
Okay.
But at the time, it was like you rotate after your first year, and then you could be there until you're a journeyman, and then you can go do whatever you want to do. And so I just told him, he goes, hey, we may have to bring you up on charges and, you know, kick you out of the union. And I said, so you're telling me that as an apprenticeship director, you have an apprentice who wants more, and because I'm not checking all the boxes, you're gonna threaten to. I said, you should think about that, and we should have a conversation.
We really don't encourage ambition. We'd like you to just suppress those emotions. Just settle. Just accept what you have, please. Sounds awesome.
So he called me back a couple days later, and he goes, "You're going to Rosendin." And one thing he said,
he assigned you then.
He assigned me to Rosendin, and so
how big was Rosendin back then?
So Rosendin was probably
top line revenue. Do that. Don't buy numbers.
60-ish, maybe
60 million in top line. What do you guys do now?
We'll be just over 2.5 and just under 3 billion for this year.
So you got them when they were doing 60 million top line revenue, and they're at just under 3 billion now. You're saying?
Yeah, this year.
That's probably a lot of change in one spot, right? So was that enough opportunity to grow for you, or?
Well, the one thing he told me, he goes, listen, that company you can go as far as you want to go in that organization. If you don't get to where you think you should be, he goes, it's because you're not good enough.
Was Rosendin like the preeminent electrical contractor at that time, or how did you know that was the right fit for you?
They were like the biggest, and you just knew that they
I
had
think Cupertino was the best. Rosendin was just the biggest.
Aren't they still? I heard they still are. I don't know that.
Here we go.
I forgot that you were there.
So you know, short circuit a lot of this. I started, you know, I would say that what led me to the mission critical work and traveling and all these things, actually it was a whole lot of trauma. You know, the thing that changed my life and made me view things differently was the passing of my brother in 2004. And
what were you then? Were you out of the apprentice program by then?
Yeah, I was a general foreman, actually. So I was probably one of our youngest general foremen.
But you had a little latitude, is what I'm saying. Like you could.
But I was in this groove where I thought, you know what? This is what I wanted to be. I wanted to be this GF. I wanted to be the top guy running the job. I maybe one day wanted to be an area superintendent. That was my path. And my brother passed, and I realized how fragile life is,
Sure.
and there's no guarantees. And so instead of playing, I've been there 21 years, granted, right? But you could play the safe route and just go and wait until you're tapped on the shoulder and, you go make that next move. Or you could just, that door's kind of halfway cracked. Have some faith in yourself, plow through it. You don't know what's on the other side, but
How did you know,
trust
though?
that you can figure it out.
How do you know that the growth that you were going to be able to get there?
I didn't.
you guys had a
What
strong-
I
I
knew,
mean,
it was a little bit darker than all of this, right? It was.
Did you have good mentors there? Did you have good?
No, I just didn't give a shit. I didn't give a shit was on the other side. I figured back in those days, I'll either drink myself to death or work myself to death.
Is this when you took over the City Center program in Virginia? Or whatever?
I was traveling all over the place for us, and I think my last job in the field was that City Center job, a job that I was no way ready for that. Right? It was like
So when
the
you had that
largest
traumatic-
job in the world.
So you had this traumatic incident that happened in your life that triggered you to be like, I don't give a shit. And you said the hardest thing in the career that I could shoot for, I'm going to go for that. Is that what you did?
I was just going to go for every opportunity thrown at me, whether I was ready for it or not, and trust that I'm just going to go out on fire, basically. And if I succeed, I succeed. And if I don't,
But did you have a goal
it'll be
at
a
that
good
point?
funeral, I guess.
But
That's what it was.
You had a goal though. You're like, I want to be a general foreman. If I'm lucky, I'll be an area general or a super.
But after all of that happened, my
just-
goal was just to like
see how far I
just to
could
see
ride
how
it.
far I can go.
Yeah, I got that.
I had no idea.
So just to recap the stories, you started with, I don't want to trivialize it, but low voltage structured cabling, then, right? Like a part of the ecosystem, like an IES type of company.
Yeah, similar. I just, before that, being with the phone company, they were data centers before they were data centers, right?
They're all DC plants, so
DC plants, backup power generation, like all. I mean, same
different
stuff.
topology,
Just
but yeah,
different but the same, right?
Yeah.
same but different.
Same, but different. Yeah.
So you went there. So you started as. I'm trying to discover if at any point in your guys' careers, did someone say this guy has whatever that other factor is, and that person's worth investing into?
No doubt.
Okay, because I believe
I'm assuming you had the same thing too, right?
Yeah, there was some older guys that I learned a lot from.
that's where it's at.
That really kind of took me under their wing. Like I said, I listened. Look, my grandpa and my father, I owe a lot to them. The way I learn, and I'm like a visual learner, I can usually see something once or do something once, and typically I can do it. I'm not a great reader. Like, I don't like reading directions. Like, I don't like reading like long books. Short stories are a little more for me.
With lots of pictures.
Lots of pictures, right? Lots of pictures. And, so I listened to those guys, right? And I did everything. And they were smart, right? And they were kind enough to take the time to invest in me because I was so young and eager to learn.
You're pretty humble. You've always been humble and hungry, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'll tell you the one thing that I think most symbolizes that is when your grandfather passed, remember the eulogy that you gave. And it's funny because my grandfather said something very similar to me. And I remember listening to you give that eulogy. I wasn't there, right, obviously, but I did listen to it when you sent that clip out to us. And it was a pretty profound statement that your grandfather said to you that obviously transcends into my own kids too, right? As my grandfather said the same thing. It's something from that generation. And that was, you don't have to be the smartest. You don't have to be the strongest. And you don't have to be the biggest. You just have to work the hardest, right? And I think that that's the one thing where like it really signifies where I can is way more important than IQ, right? I mean, there's tons of people that could do long division way faster than me on our team. But, the thing is we share a different, maybe what separates us is our EQ, or what separates us is those other things which you have and maybe that's one thing that gravitated us together. But like that part of the story is what I'm trying to get into this narrative right here, because there are people that are going to probably one day listen that are where you were as a low voltage structured cabling guy or something at the phone company before you got to that contractor, and you, I mean, right now there's an apprentice coming out of the program that in 21 years from now is going to be an EVP for for the largest electrical contractor in North America, right?
I hope so. Or else, what are we doing all this for, right?
Well,
100%.
but think about it. You started. I mean, look at who you are now. So you work for Yondr. Prior to that, what did you deploy? About $1 billion annually at CyrusOne.
Yeah.
So you didn't get in that part of your story, and we're going to get to it. But you control the mission critical vertical, basically, probably at Rosendin. At least how much money they spend into that space, or capturing, or recognizing that revenue, or converting it. What's that? $1 billion, $1.5 billion? How? It's more. I mean, the law. So think about where, if you're a listener right now and you're like, look, I'm on the ecosystem side. I'm working for a contractor and I'm just getting started. I don't have any college. I'm just getting started. I don't have any college. Like, I enlisted in the military. I went to college for 1.5 years, and then I went in the military, and I didn't finish school until I got out. I started in this industry as a UPS service engineer. There's something that drives people. People are either motivated or they're not, right? So trying to understand how much of that was from within you and how much of that came from outside. Your mentor, or mentors, my mentors, right? So like, keep going, but I want you to identify, like, those are the things that I think that people will resonate with more.
So, you mean to take it?
Yeah, go for it.
So,
It's important to have good leaders.
I had an unbelievable mentor in John Hayden, obviously known in the industry, pretty
Data center Yoda.
I had the pleasure of working for him alongside him, if you will.
How did you meet him?
He hired me at Bear Stearns.
No shit.
Yeah.
So he's the guy that hired you.
Were you not here for the first part of this podcast?
Hold on a second.
Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
Hold on. I didn't think he hired you, though.
He
I thought
did.
you ended up working for him.
Yeah, I did. He hired me.
He was
flew
the
down.
interview guy.
Yeah, that's when I met
Now,
him.
is he a Raider fan? He was like, he went to Tech for a semester.
For a little while, yeah.
Yeah.
So he hired me at
What?
Bear
I don't like the
Stearns.
tone.
Hey, listen, I'm just paying
Slap
attention.
him.
Bear Stearns, Concept, and then Cyrus.
That's right.
Yeah. So we worked together for a long time. Had great relationship. Still a close friend of mine. We talk weekly. But I learned a lot from him. And what I learned, the thing I learned from John, outside of the technical aspect, was really something that was really hard for me to really comprehend initially. And that was that you have to separate your personal and business. And let me give you some context around that. Taking the emotion out of situations when you're at work. And I mean that in the regards of I'm so passionate, and I've always been so passionate about everything that I do. I'm passionate about people. I'm passionate about how people are treated. I'm passionate about projects. I'm passionate about everything I surround myself with as it relates to getting something done. And you can't be that passionate without taking some things personal, right? It's hard not to. And John was one of the ones, or the one that really taught me that, listen, as passionate as you are, you're taking it personal, and you got to separate that, right? And listen, not all lessons are easy, right? And old habits die hard. But when I finally got the hang of that, that was a big, that was instrumental for me in terms of my professional maturity, because it helped me.
How old were you think when you topped that up?
I was building a project in around 2011, and I just had, I fired off some emails, and it was listen, you're taking this personal, and it's not intended to be, and it was hard. When I was on
Where were you at 2011?
I was at Concept, and we were building a Cyrus project in Louisville. Yeah, and
was that Dennis Shive and Kenneth Wolverton days? I was on that program.
That was those days, yeah.
Yeah, I was peeing there.
And so it was just there was a lot going on, a lot of moving pieces, and I was just in the middle trying to get. And it's hard not to take stuff personal.
Now, where was John? Was he the PM at Concept? He was a PX or something.
I was the PM. He was the director, managing director of the group.
Data center.
Yeah. But the thing that to get back to the point that you wanted us to try to get across here as a group is the one thing that I learned very early on was that I had the ability to lead people, and I had the luxury of learning very early on that the most rewarding thing ever is actually being able to be in a position to empower people and put them in a position for them to be successful, right? Mm-hmm. So when you help someone, realize that they're capable of doing something that they didn't think that they could do themselves, there's nothing more rewarding than that, right? Yeah. So leading teams, leading groups of folks, helping others, whether it's a vendor, whether it's a supplier, whether it's a contractor, whatever it is, like that was where I really excelled, because I had done various pieces of all of those different things that were associated with a project. So I could empathize with every person that was a part of that project and how hard their job was, and also how important of a piece of the puzzle it was to getting the project done. So, I
had a lot of empathy,
a ton of empathy, a lot of understanding, and just like the ability to help them, be successful. And for me, like, I think, when people that have a goal out there or whatever, when they understand that, like, listen, like, you don't have to just be unbelievably great at anything. You just have to have the ability to lead others in a way to get everything done, right? Because you're not going to know everything. You just have to have the ability to get everything done, right? Yeah. But that starts with your interaction with people, right? I learned at a very, young age, on projects and whatnot, that if you just communicate, right? Never be afraid to ask the dumb question, right? If you know everything, that means you're in the wrong room, right? And just listen to the people that are there trying to help you along with the project, and just open communication.
To do that, you have to feel safe in that environment, right? So you had John, who was a mentor, and a trainer who probably gave you a little bit of space to where he's like, look, you're going to make some mistakes, but I'm not going to kill you when that happens. We're going to ride through it. And is that something that transcended through you into those teams that you were building when you were spending, 7, 8, 900 million a year when you were doing Cyrus?
I think so. I mean, look, I think that you hire people and you work with people because of their character and because of their personality. I mean, listen, there's some stuff that you can teach and there's some you can't, right?
Some people are motivated or not.
And you work with motivated people, even if they don't know everything, like, that they're so eager to learn that they're going to get it done. And I mean, listen, there's some luck involved in that, right? I've been fortunate enough to be exposed to some great people, and I was fortunate enough for them to come join my team when they had other options. And I've made so many great friends in the industry. I mean, I had an unbelievable team at my prior, place of employment. I have an unbelievable team now that I've assembled.
Yeah, you have some studs, for sure.
Yeah, just great people. And at the end of the day, like, there's nothing more powerful than motivated, like, folks.
Sure.
Right?
Because you can unleash them, So I get that. For you, did you have a specific mentor, or was it just the foreman that was looking out for you?
I had a handful of mentors, like, through my whole career that just invested time with me. Wow. I don't know. It's strange, right? But, whether
there's a million kids out there.
Like, even when I was an apprentice, right? I mean, some of the best, like, top guys in the field, they would literally, like, spend hours with me teaching me about all the non-electrical stuff, like how to read civil drawings and going through structural detail. I mean, just going through and they would crack open some beers and just sit there and talk and just download, right? Download all this wealth of information. And
were you staying late for that intel?
Oh, yeah.
That wisdom and guidance? That's the trick, right?
You
got to stay late.
Whatever it is. Now you get people who are like,
oh, yeah, it's 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm out, right? I'm off the clock. And it wasn't like that. I mean, listen, we were that whole scenario and that where I was in my life, I mean, I was working probably 20 hours a day between work during the day and side jobs at night just to make rent.
Sure.
Right? Washing paper plates and literally.
Yeah, we all start from somewhere.
Literally.
And you started at some pretty humble beginnings too, right? I mean, like,
there was a period of time that I didn't mention when I was working for the EC, running the low voltage, where I had a side business doing low voltage, and I had a lawn service
Sure.
and the full-time job. All three.
Hey, can you bring that back? I need some help at my place.
That grass ain't gonna cut. That grass don't cut itself.
Yeah.
All right. Go lead some teams.
Yeah. Yeah.
Edward Scissorhands over here.
But you had some folks that invested in you, right? I mean, that's this industry. That's I think for like obviously you know what's the most important to my heart, right? Is I do everything I can to help give back to the veteran community, right? I mean, my story is different, right? But I do know that this is there were always people that had been like we all started from somewhere. There was someone that had empathy for where I started from, and they were as long as I was willing to put out, they were willing to invest. But I had to put out hard.
That's right.
You might want to reword that.
Fair enough, but I could put out hard is all I'm saying. You know? I look. You have to have worked hard enough for a guy like John Hayden to come up and be like, I'm gonna fucking make sure that you got all the resources you need and the room you need to grow. And you had a collection of people that did the same thing. It sounds like, and by then, I mean, Rosendin's growing. They're just massively exploding probably throughout that time.
Yeah, but it's like you got to be willing to be uncomfortable. I think it's really the key to it.
Be brave enough to suck at something new, right?
Oh yeah. I
Ask
mean,
the stupid questions. That's the challenge. Is a lot of people that get in this space, they're just look. There's a lot of anxiety that comes on when you get into the vertical like this. I mean, I remember sitting there watching. I sat in OACs where people were talking about and they're using acronyms like PDU and ATS,
all the hot
EIEIO, and I'm like, what the heck? I remember one time in a meeting leaning over to someone and they're like, it's called Google. Look it up. Now shut the fuck up and listen. And I was like, good advice, you know? And I've probably used that advice. I'm sure, you know, Jesse's on
all
my
the way
team.
in the boardroom, huh?
Yeah. But like, I got guys that have been, you know, working with me in orbit forever and they'll ask me questions and I'd love to answer them. But I'm like, you're not a bird in the nest anymore. You don't just sit there and wait to get fed. You got to go out there and figure out the answer sometimes. And I want to see you work for it and then we'll help you. Right. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same way in which what inspires you to want to invest into somebody. It's when you see that they're willing to work hard, right? So you did it. You had a collection of people that invested into you. And without that, I mean, you definitely wouldn't be where you're at, but you had such talent there. So bring me back to like where you got that. And it sounds like it's not just one person, but then like how that evolved.
No, it was a handful of people, right? And
Are a lot of them still Rosendin?
yeah, so I would say
everyone in
right
Rosendin's
now,
been
like
forever.
the most influential people in my life, right? And nobody's gonna know these names, and well, you'll know a couple names just because there's some heavy hitters there. But you know, my area superintendent, he just retired, right? And he was my mentor I've known him for 20 some odd years. Steve Kennedy, he just retired this year. We gave him a big bash, and I mean that was the guy who like flipped pages and taught me like the mechanics of what we do, right?
Yeah.
And then you had somebody else who just retired this year, you know, Mike Roberts. He was a big shot for our organization. Actually came back down here to Texas and closed his career out here for me. But I mean, he was another guy that just but you've got like the Larry Beltramos, and I mean,
Sure.
listen,
You
got Matt Englert, right? Should we start that? That
Captain
could be a whole nother
TQ.
podcast. I guess.
Yeah. He's like what, Rob Lowe's Mexican illegitimate twin brother?
Something like that, right? But you know, there was just all these people that just saw something, and it wasn't that they had it figured out. They're like, oh yeah, this is his path. I mean, maybe Larry, I don't know. The guy's genius. John Green, right, too. I don't want to leave anybody out, but they knew that they were going to kind of put the guardrails up and provide the opportunity because there's the drive there, but there's so much sacrifice. I mean, when I was younger and I was traveling for this organization, I mean, I was home 52 days a year.
Yeah. I got on plane on Mondays, came home on Fridays.
I didn't even come home on Fridays. I came home like every other Friday. And
It's tough.
that's tough, right? And there's a lot going on in these times, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's that sacrifice for the job and for the greater good. I mean, and I really think that was one of the big differentiators.
But where were
in
you
our
driven by
organization.
then? Were you still like, you went through this dark window, right? When you lost Brian, and when that happened, you went full throttle. Like, I'm gonna go full throttle everything. Now, during that time, was that when the guardrails were coming up at those places? Those guys saw
Well,
you.
yeah, because it was probably more responsibility, but like, I guess when, like, if we're talking specifically about like that travel window, so that 52 days a year, I mean, I would never ask anybody in our organization to do what we did, ever.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's what like breaks marriages and just breaks people down. It's hard, like being on the road. We will never do that as an organization. Right. But that was just, a lot of it has to do with like the immaturity even of our business scaling and stretching. We don't know how it's affecting. And there's a lot of people that got destroyed by that, because I wasn't the only one. Right. And there's people that stuck it out.
But I think it's an interesting point he makes, and it's probably something I think you'll get to eventually. But it's the thought of how much more mature the industry is now, right?
Sure.
To his point, like when the time frame that he's referring to, like this business was very specialized, right?
It's very niche.
Everyone traveled. Everyone went to a destination to go build something, right? There wasn't 100 data centers being built all simultaneously in different regions, right? So people traveled, right? So that's an interesting point that he makes, right? That people don't have to do it now because there's so many talented people in different markets to support, projects and customers and that sort of thing. But back then, the only choice we had was to get on a plane or get in a car and go for weeks, months at a time to get a job done.
Yeah, and you had businesses that weren't global or national businesses that were stretching out of like, Texas or California or wherever, right? And they're flinging their people all the way around right now, all over the place.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
So we've got a bigger, I think now we've got a more substantial bench, which allows us to provide more balance.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for customers and for your
our
employees,
people.
right? Your
For our
people
people.
and the customer.
Yeah.
It's tough. Yeah.
Well, that's
for
the
sure.
balance.
But like, you're white knuckling it, in those early days. I mean, I got to start up on this, we outside of DCAC, I have another job. And on that one, the only thing, like, people are like, how you doing? I'm like, my knuckles are white today. Right. And it's because you make processes as you go, right? You guys are pretty mature now. So you guys have probably memorialized or papered up on everything that you guys do to standardize into some sort of fashion where you could go to someone like him and go like, hey, this is the transparent delivery model. This is what we do every time. But how long did it take to get to that, right? And how many mistakes and how many relationships got pressure tested hard? And it's a tough racket. I mean, I think my advice for anybody that would be coming into this space, and we have 18,000 veterans in our database, or some of them are currently active duty. I mean, there's a guy that I'm going to hire to come in and take over all of our HR, but he's not available until June. He's a detailer in the Navy. He's a chief. He's lights out, but I can't get him until then, right? But my advice to them, and there's veterans that I'm mentoring and counseling right now that they're going to go work for, the IESs of the world or your guys' group maybe potentially. And when we talk to them, I'm like, you got to be prepared. You got to be prepared to look for the opportunity. And the opportunity doesn't come for free. You're going to have to come in early, stay late, and volunteer for those harder programs. And you're going to have to look for ways in which you could immerse yourself in the most complicated opportunities where you have to learn to be comfortable in an uncomfortable environment.
Yeah, I think, one of the good indicators for me is on whether you're pushing yourself to that next level or not is like, have you failed? Because if you haven't felt that daunting feeling and just that weight on your shoulders of failure, then you probably aren't pushing yourself hard enough. And you're not there. You are not there. I mean, it's easy to
You're right.
You
You're
know
right.
what I mean?
You're right.
But if that's the true definition of redlining is failure and then getting back up and grinding it out after that.
That's the barometer for sure. I used to tell everybody that would listen, if nothing goes wrong on a project, you're not trying to go fast enough.
Yeah, you're not pushing hard.
You're just not, right?
Playing it safe.
Yeah, I mean, and look, that's the ideal scenario is that you create an environment where everybody wants to succeed because they don't want to fail you, right?
Yeah.
Not because they fear you, but because they don't want to fail you, right? No one wants to be responsible for being the reason a project date gets missed or something goes wrong or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You create an infectious culture that just drives everybody to want to be the best at what they're doing. You got yourself a team, a good one. And that's to me, I mean, I could go on and on and on and they do a whole nother podcast with you about what it means to like be a part of a team and not just lead one, but be a part of one that actually means something, where everybody just wants to be the best at everything, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, what you guys are describing is a military-based culture, very selfless in nature. It's like the phalanx of the Spartan shields come together, right? And your only job is to, like, there was a time when we started Overwatch where our first 2 generations of challenge coins had a Spartan shield on one side of it. And people would be like, why is that? And I'm like, well, if you were a Spartan, the most important weapon that you had was the shield, not the spear. The spear was to protect you. The shield was to protect the person to the left of you.
Yeah.
And it was to serve as a reminder where we are our brother and sister's keeper. Our job is to make them successful, and as a byproduct, they'll make us successful, right? And creating those cultures, like I learned that on a submarine, right? And I learned it in my house growing up. I mean, my whole family's military, right? So I always had this paramilitary type of mentality, but that's something that I'm always fascinated when I run into my civilian counterparts, and I'm like, how did you learn that? How did you learn that? And you're not going to learn it from only veterans. There's plenty of civilians out there that understand this thing too, but it's no different than, we're in the mission critical vertical, which is measured based on, I remember when I first got into this space, I remember talking to a broker in Dallas, and I remember thinking, I said, I started in building hospitals, right? And I remember thinking, like, what makes a data center mission critical versus a hospital? And he goes, yeah, it's simple. If you could quantify downtime by 1 second of lost IT, by $1 million of lost revenue or death, it's mission critical. And it's subjective. I mean, it was
sure.
It was something that someone else created, but I'm like, okay. Well, in the military, we measure, our downtime by mortality, right? So I look at this and go, how dangerous. I mean, obviously you were just explaining the dangers of what you did. I'm sure you've been dangerous when you're pushing the red line on construction programs, especially when, let's be honest, the only thing that CyrusOne was really selling at the time was a speed of delivery and a predictable delivery model, right? So the whole product was speed to market. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you create a transparent and predictable delivery model? By relying so much on everybody else that does it. You have to rely on an architect and engineering team. You got to rely on all the contractors that are performing the trades, as well as the GC, and then the commissioning guys that make sure that these guys didn't build it so fast and wrong, and they're blowing the doors off everything when you're commissioning it, right? So you have to rely on so many people when you're doing those big programs that there's a lot of pressure, right? And for you guys, it sounds like every opportunity you had to go the direction in which you didn't feel comfortable is where you found growth. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So is that the advice that you would give to new listeners who are sitting down? They're like, look, I just got out of college, or I, like you, decided I was going to get into this industry, and it rewards. I like this industry because I felt like it never really rewarded experience more than willingness. I was like, as long as I'm willing to work hard, I could go toe to toe with anybody that has more experience than me, because I could learn data centers, but they can't learn to work hard, Yeah. So
I think opportunity in most cases, right, as the old saying goes, like it presents itself in the form of hard work. So you have to be, savvy enough to recognize what an opportunity actually is, right? And I think that's a lot of times that's what gets missed is what an actual opportunity looks like.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah,
it
but
comes
9 times out of 10, opportunity isn't like,
yeah.
I'm going to tap you on the shoulder. You
It's
ready?
it's in the form of hard
Right.
work, and it comes to you.
It's luck.
And
Luck is hard work meets opportunity. Yeah.
And it's cryptic, right? At
I
times.
don't even know if it's luck. Why?
You're not
much of
saying
that
you're you may be the luckiest sumbitch any of us have ever met.
Well, luck favors the prepared, right?
Right.
That's the other saying. But I just feel like opportunity, like a lot of people are waiting on that bluebird, right? And those just don't
The
exist.
perfect pitch. Yeah.
Right? They just don't exist. At the end of the day, you have to be able to recognize an opportunity. And sometimes you have to make your own opportunity, right? And that typically comes in the form of hard work, right? You got to be willing to give more to get more, right? And some people have that and some people don't, right? But the one thing I will say is I have been so fortunate in the positions I've been in to basically give people an opportunity that they may otherwise have never received like otherwise, right? And I think that's as important as it is for someone to seek or evaluate or understand an opportunity. I think it's equally as important for someone to just be given an opportunity, right? And it's different, but it's not. By that, I mean, like some people are the absolute unbelievable at their craft, at what they do, at whoever they are. They just need an opportunity. And I was fortunate enough to be in a position to give people an opportunity that really allowed them to like set the world on fire, whether it was a vendor, whether it was a contractor, whether it was a supplier, whether it was somebody that worked on my team. I just had to give them the autonomy to like go do what they're great at, right? And they just needed that opportunity to do that. So that's probably the one thing that I could give as far as advice is like it's opportunity, but it's on both sides, as I just explained, right? One's one side, one's the other. Some people need an opportunity and the others like have to recognize what an opportunity is.
Yeah, but if you're on the receiving end of that opportunity, I mean, a lot of people are like very analytical about that, right? They're like, okay, I've completed this.
Linear.
I can now go to this, right? It's very linear and jump, like take that jump, skip a step or 2 or 5 or 10 and get yourself back into that uncomfortableness.
Sure.
And I mean, just if we all took the job that we were ready for,
Right.
I'd be in the field bending pipe right now. You'd still be punching down cables.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you've just got to. So I think as a leader in the industry, it's our job to recognize that, you need to be looking so much further down the ranks for that next Laramie Doris, right? And it's not linear, right? And I think as somebody who's hungry for that opportunity, like just jump and don't just have faith in yourself, have faith in the industry or the business that you're working for to provide you that kind of backstop and take a swing. Because if you don't swing.
So what inspired you to be like that? How'd your mind get like that? I know, Laramie was talking about like his grandfather and all these other people and these older guys that are.
Well, I think I touched upon it earlier. I mean, it took a complete mental shift for me into really like what reality is. And reality is
that a life-changing event though?
Yeah, that life-changing event. Yeah, that was what, I mean, literally everything catapulted.
Yeah. Changed
based on my brother's death. I mean, I just gave zero shits about anything, and I was just going to swing.
No fear
I was going to go
failure.
It was not going to paralyze me, right? It was no longer going to paralyze me, and it at the end of the day, there was no more status quo. That was it, and I was just going to go and figure out, where the roof was. I thought I had this definition, and I thought I had a relatively low ceiling,
sure.
and it just
I've done it.
It just changed everything.
We all have a homogenous, idea of what, it starts when you're in school, right? Go to school, get good grades, go to a good college, go get a good job, get some good money, and you're happy. And that's not how it works.
Go get married, have some kids,
Right.
and, sunset off.
But I've heard you say it before, Ophel, like, and it takes some time for people to come to the realization, right? Because we're, as a culture, right, we're so hardwired into winning, right? It's about winning, right? You want to win at all costs, right? At a big W, right? No matter what. And at the end of the day, like when you come to the realization that you never lose if you learn, which I've heard you say on multiple occasions, right? Like that becomes like the pivotal point of like understanding that like you don't want to lose, but it's okay if you lose. Because listen, like you're not going to win every time at everything, but as long as you learn, you're better, right? And you're going to be able to make others better as long as you learn.
Yeah.
I think you need to also surround yourself with people that are going to challenge you and pressure test you, right? Like, for me, I'm all about failure, right? Like, I'm all about embracing the suck and all those other things. But I do feel a lot better knowing that I got some people that have my six, right? So, like, there are times where, I'll do certain things and it won't be in line with what a traditional career narrative may look like. And sometimes you got to be willing to go it alone. You got to have that. But hopefully you're like, man, I hope that's where you understand who real relationships are and real friends. And I think that's why this industry is so special is, look at you guys. Like you've been in one spot, but you've really, you had, as it was growing, you were growing your wings throughout that one organization. So you never had to really leave that space and go to another one to get the opportunity that you needed for growth. You left and you changed companies as you found that you needed to find a place that offered you the next challenge that you had. Because we hit a plateau. You guys have also probably heard me say this, where I'm like, you can be the Dallas Cowboys, right? The strength of that team is measured based on the average capability of that team. And at every team, you have positive and negative outliers, which are drawing down or pulling up that average. And if you're in a position where you could effectively drive change and you have the ability to move the average up, but if not, then you're going to be suffering or you're going to be frustrated because you're like, I have a better idea. This is mediocre, or, our approach is complacent at best and we need to find a way to do things. And people are like, nope, this is how we've always done it. And, from that end, you're like, okay, well then the growth that I need isn't here, right? People don't ever leave businesses, they leave management, right? So companies are just people where you have a philosophy or an ideology that stands at that business and it says, this is how we do things. This is our way. And you have to find a place in which you guys are going to be allowed to go do what you were talking about, which is not giving a shit and just going all out and figuring out what happens if I fail. Like, it's a lot for like Larry and those guys to be like, unleashed, go grow. A lot for you to be unleashed. Go, let's see what you can do. Because at some point, you were both probably the youngest of whatever it is that you were doing and the roles that you were doing in this industry. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Youngest of what you were doing, you don't get to that because of aptitude. You're not blessed with talent for that. You have to work for it, right? So going back to your story, at what part, and you could, take us through where you got to a part, where did the two of you guys meet?
Oh, man.
2000 and...
Cyrus went Phoenix?
Was that like at a Bob's? I feel like it was at a Bob's in Dallas.
No, I think it was actually...
He would know. He has like the memory of an elephant.
When you say Bob's, you mean like...
So when we actually met, the first time I met you in person, Graham wasn't there. It was you and Matt. It was me, Jason Green, and you in a steakhouse in San Francisco.
Okay,
that was like some DCD.
A Vantage.
It was for DCD. Simon was there.
Yeah,
right. But that's when we first actually met. Graham wasn't on the trip. It was just me.
Were you by yourself?
That's right.
The second time
you introduced me to Graham.
That's right.
That's what it was. All right,
and then,
I got it.
You got it backwards. And then the next time we met was at a Bob's that's in Dallas.
And that's when
you met Graham. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Like had Graham tried to introduce me to you, we probably would have never met.
Were you with Matt back then?
Yeah,
he was with Matt.
Yeah, it was with
okay,
Matt.
so listen. So at that time, what were you doing at Rosendin?
Oh, I think I had just come out of the field running all these jobs for us, and I joined Matt Englert's Mission Critical group at the time, and we were like just in the infancy.
Sure.
You know, Matt had been working on that for a couple of years, but we were just kind of ramping that thing up into what it is today.
Okay, I got it. Because I met you through Englert, but it was at a Vantage site because of Jason Green facilitated that meeting.
Yeah.
So I think I was probably at HB.
Jason Green.
Yeah. So it's funny. So Jason Green introduced all of us. I mean, not you and I, but
I guess.
No, I think I actually introduced myself to you.
I could tell you when I met you.
You were walking the Cyrus side in Houston.
I was with David Fiedler.
Yep, you were the only guy that
He was at EYP.
I said I got to meet that guy.
Hey, who's this kid?
Got to meet him.
The only grown man you see with.
Yeah, I know.
Got to meet this guy.
Like he lost
any guy with the testicular fortitude to get braces.
That was a beatdown. That was a really poor decision in life. That was the wrong time to get braces.
It was great.
Grown ass man, had to talk for a living.
That was
next,
awesome.
That was cool.
Yeah, that's where we met. This is a generator.
We were in Houston. Oh yeah, like what? I'm like, what's a PD? What's it called again? But I do remember that we were on the back deck. You were looking at the gen yard.
Or Concept,
like
it was.
You were Concept. You were super there back then.
Houston
right?
West, PM.
That's it. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. Listen, everybody's a super. Anybody that's any good was a superintendent at something at one point.
Oh yeah,
and that's a dying breed. Like we could do a whole nother cast on like
just
superintendents.
The importance of a good super for
amazing.
Sure.
Yeah,
that's right.
But I'll tell you, I do remember that I was with Hadessa. Yeah. Back and like we were evaluating that site. Fiedler was evaluating that site. This is obviously before he went and did all of his things. But, That was I remember that pretty vividly, and I remember vividly when I met you too. I probably don't remember how many years ago it was. I'm sure it was 10.
That would have been 2012.
Yeah, and probably close around the same time for you.
Yeah.
So,
but I think the thing, like, to not get too far off subject, but like the thing we haven't really touched on is like the family atmosphere, like of this industry.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Like the relationships that are built, like the relationships that are forged. JT touched on it a little bit, but like, with the amount of time that you're away from your family on the road with these people,
you
like
spend just as much time with them.
The relationships that are created, the amount of time spent together, and like, listen, some of the opportunities that I touched on earlier simply are only created because of somebody's that or somebody that trusts you, right? And they're just invaluable, and they go so much further than just, a handshake or somebody that does something in the industry. Everyone does something, but do they really do something, right? And like the people that you're able to meet in this business and give opportunity to, and the opportunities that are given, like I just can't speak enough about like how instrumental it is, how instrumental it was for me, how instrumental I've been able to be to others, like through that, like it's just so big. Like everyone knows everybody. It's a huge industry, but it's so small at the same time. And like the relationship component is just invaluable.
Yeah. I try to like when I talk to the young people that we hire, I'm like, think of it like high school. There's like a freshman class, a sophomore class, like if we're the junior class, there's always a senior class. It's
some third and fourth year seniors. Like
it's people but it's a lifestyle to them now, right? Too.
Yeah.
I mean, like this is their identity. This is who they are.
It doesn't matter how good you are. This is a relationship-based business.
1,000%.
People don't trust you, and like inherently love and admire what you do. And it's not about like what you bring to them. Like everybody, I think we get caught up in the industry about like, how can I help you? It's just like it's these minor movements in everything that you do. It's not one big thing, right? Mm-hmm. It's just every day moving you and your little pack just that closer to the goalpost, right?
Yeah.
Collectively, right? And bringing everybody up with you, right?
Yeah, I mean, your ability to make everybody around you better is what people look at, right?
Yeah.
Like people know they talk about us, you, me, whoever. Like they're like, listen, he makes people better, right? And not only does he do that, he wants to do that, right? And I think that's an important piece that gets missed. And look, somebody really smart once told me, like, listen, like, you want everyone to choose the same path that you took. Well, guess what, asshole? That path doesn't exist anymore.
Sure.
Right? Because everyone has a path that's unique, right?
Yeah.
And they're not wrong in saying that, right? But apart from that, like someone saying, like, listen, that guy legitimately makes people better, right? And he wants to make everybody around him better, right? Not for the glory of it, but just for the simple fact that he recognizes that
That's their
everyone
purpose.
around him
Yeah.
is even better than he is, but it's his job to make them better. That's special, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's, our industry has several people that actually care about making others better.
Sure.
Right.
We're going to talk about that too, because one of my questions that I was going to ask you guys when we got around the horn on like where we all started and where we all, we all start from somewhere. There was a point in time which none of us knew what a data center was. Then all of a sudden, here we are. Right. And when we get through that point, one of my questions is, what's your favorite thing about this industry? Right. And I think that's the part where people invested. It's the first time where I found that people invested into us at no gain of their own, right? And, Fiedler actually referred to it a lot as the karma train. He's like, you got to always feed that karma train because you don't know when it's coming back around for you, And I think you guys have probably heard me talk about the advice I was given once that had maybe one of the most profound impacts on me. And that was Peter Gross once said to me, he's like, hey, be careful of the toes you step on today because they may be connected to the ass you're kissing tomorrow, right? How many times have we seen guys, GT, how many guys have worked on your staff and ended up working at FAMGA? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the reality is, one day they could be your peers, next day they could be your customer, next day they could be your vendor, right? And those relationships, like, they have to matter, right? Because those relationships are critical because they establish that foundation of trust. And that foundation of trust and respect is what's used to help influence those people to make a purchasing decision, whether or not they want to trust you or not, right? And that was probably some of the most important information that I had because at that time, I'm like any other new professional going into a career where, you're like, I'm just going to do it as hard as I can, as much as I can, and I'm going to hope that everything just takes care of itself. But the reality is you need mentors kind of monitoring you and making sure that they put the guardrails up, as you were saying, right, to protect you from yourself. But you also need someone who's going to encourage you when you make those mistakes, and you don't feel comfortable to take those risks unless you know that you have not really a safety net, but let's be honest, as tough as we all think we may be, you really need some folks in your corner, right? And you need folks in your corner that are going to be objective.
Yeah, and I think, folks in your corner, it's not necessarily top down, right? Especially in this industry, right? You look at all the milestones that it takes to deliver a project in this industry and those pivotal points, it's every single bit of that supply chain. And it could be quote unquote, a sub tier to you, right? Like below you, but
or above,
but
right.
The folks in your corner, some of the most powerful influences I've had on my life and that have provided the best opportunity. I think LD can say the same thing, is like from that just that procurement phase and those relationships with the manufacturers. And if they trust you and they believe in what you're saying, they will go to bat for you. Right.
Yeah.
And we see it in what we do. And I know you see it in what you do, LD. They will move mountains for you. Right.
Yeah.
Because they know
massive inconvenience.
So it's not that 3 a.m. call.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. And it's not just like, it's not all coming from the top of the mountain, right? Foster those relationships all around you and invest time with those people.
At that moment, to his point, like someone in that supply chain is making a decision that they don't have the authority to make, right? At that moment, putting themselves out for you and for the cause, right?
They're giving you their word.
Right. But take some credit, right, that you've helped create a culture that's inviting to that, where people aren't scared to put themselves out for the greater good of the outcome of the project, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's for the customer, whether you're the customer, like no matter what, like, you know, that's what it's about.
So how do you get to that, right? That's nirvana, right? That's where we all want to get to. It's the point where you can move the needle just based on not your street cred, but maybe the reputation that you have or the respect that they have for you, which proves to serve as equity in some cases in this space. Like you gotta cash it in every now and then, right? And people remember in this space. It's a small space, right? And I learned that is when I was I'm on the vendor side now, but I don't think I fully appreciated just how tight the industry was until I realized that most of these people all talk to each other enough. Like when you were at Cyrus, you probably talked to everybody that was your peer for every other major operator, publicly traded REIT or not, right? And they'd call you and be like, what's your thoughts on this thing? You'd be like, stay the hell away from them. They only care about this. And then after that, it's a change order palooza, right? It doesn't take much to blacklist, that type of thing, to make sure that we're all protecting each other from this space, right? We want to see, have you ever not wanted to see other folks that you work with, regardless of where they're at? Even if some cases it was at another place that may have in some ways been a competition of yours, and you're like, he's a good person and I'm going to make sure he's successful still.
All day long.
All day.
Yeah, I never viewed it that way. Like I think anybody that you would talk to, yourself included, when you were at a competitor at the time, like would agree. Like for me, it was about the opportunity for the person, no matter what service they were providing, right? Like I wanted to give everybody a great recommendation that wanting to provide a service or a product for anybody that was for us or for a competitor. I mean, listen, you know, self-awareness is also a big deal, right? You come to the realization that as great as we all think we are, we're not for everybody, right? Like when you run a really refined program, it's not a good fit for everyone, right?
Sure.
Some people thrive where there's more chaos and there's less predictability and there's more latitude for things to do different things in terms of like dates to move out or maybe the possibility of a product to change or whatever, right? And not everyone wants to provide a service that's so vanilla, right? And when you are in charge of like refining a super predictable vanilla product,
everyone wants to be a hero.
Everyone wants to be a hero and change something, right? So like
they like the sprinkles on top.
There you go. So like the self-awareness I'm talking about is my own or your own at the time, where you're saying like, listen, like we're not like just there are people that you're simply not going to get to work with. And it doesn't mean that they're not great companies or they're not great people. It just means whatever service or product or whatever they're offering, it just isn't necessarily a fit for what you're doing, right?
Sure.
Right. And the awareness of that and like, owning that and understanding that without trying to like, cast shade, if you will, onto their product or their service simply because you guys or girls don't get to work together. Like you have to come to that realization or understand that, right? And I thought I always tried to do a really good job of making sure that if someone called me for reference for somebody or asked for something, and we weren't doing business with that person or that product or whatever it was, that I was very clear that it wasn't because that wasn't a great product. It just wasn't a part of our program, right? Sure. And that kind of feeds back into what you were saying.
You suck at that edge. I've called you a few times to try to get a reference, and you're very, distant. I'm like, shut up. You're worthless. But, all right, well, listen, so we caught up to where you're still, you kind of grew through your ranks. Is there any part of your narrative there that I may have skipped over? Because I definitely don't want to trivialize how much went into getting to where you're at before we shift back into we're still at him at the bank before he left to go to, I'm guessing was it Concept first?
Yeah.
Okay, so before he...
Feels like he should play a little catch up now.
Oh, well, listen, so what made you go to Concept? And don't get me wrong, I love Sean and those guys. I think they're amazing. But
yeah. So
Sean's awesome.
Yeah.
So
John had gone there.
My favorite Irishman ever, right? Englishman.
No, he's Irish.
I thought he was English.
Born in Ireland, raised in England. Call him an Englishman next time you see him.
Oh, every chance I get, I call him an Englishman. But he would murder all of us at the same time.
Sean, if you're watching
or listening,
I'll send you his address.
What a good dude. So you went to Concept. How did that work?
So the same, oddly enough, the same.
They were building a lot of Cyrus at the time.
None yet. They were doing. They did some digital work, and were doing some above net work, and then I got the call to kind of help facilitate the Cyrus work.
Okay.
But oddly enough, the same guy. So remember, I met the brother. I met a guy in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
His brother was the one that worked at Bear that introduced me to John. That said they were looking for somebody.
Got it.
That same guy had gone to work at Concept.
Oh,
And
so
he's like, I know guys that build data centers as well. So they hired John because they had work in New Jersey already, Piscataway.
Yeah, been there.
You
For
guys
digital.
were on the job. Yeah, digital. They were Rosendin was the EC. And then like a year later, like I'm still at JP Morgan, and then like
Was Nova the GC? Just curious.
no.
All right.
They're going after some Cyrus work in Texas, and they call me and like, oh, like John's like, oh, I have a guy there if we can land this work. And anyways, they hired me, and that's why I ended up going to Concept. So
I got it.
yeah, there a couple years working. Like at the time, Cyrus only had 3 sites.
They had
All in
hold on,
Texas.
2 in Houston, 1 in Dallas, or technically Louisville. was there?
Austin.
They did have the Austin one.
Austin.
I remember that one.
Yeah, so Houston, Austin.
Was Ferdman still their CEO back then?
It had already
Been
gone.
acquired by Avery.
Not yet. No, Abry, yeah. He was still the CEO shortly after it would go to Cincinnati Bell.
Okay, so was Wojo the president then?
Almost.
Got it.
Almost. That was in transition.
Okay.
Yeah. So did a couple of years in Houston, Monday to
As a concept
Sunday
guy?
to Friday as a concept guy building Houston West. Among some other stuff like, sporadically for them across the board. And then John leaves Concept, takes the job at Cyrus One.
I remember that.
Yeah. I finish up a project in Houston, and I took a job.
You pulled a Kirk O'Fell.
Well, I did. I did. But I went to build a power plant in West Africa.
Not random at all.
Not random. And at the end of 2011, early
Oh, yeah.
early
Remember, he was like
2012.
running marathons back then. Remember?
It's a long time ago.
We were at like the Byron Nelson. And he was looking all fit and shit. I'm like, this guy's gonna jack me up. I gotta make sure I use my P's and Q's.
It's a long time ago. So yeah, I worked in West Africa, and then when I came back,
Because those are big programs. How big were those power plants you were putting together?
it was a 100 megawatt primary power gen plant off of HFO diesel recep engines. So
Okay.
yeah, big stuff.
And there's really no entitlement process in Africa at that time. I'm guessing
This was like get it done, Charlie type stuff.
Right.
But but it was a little fulfilling at the same time. You guys can laugh at me later, but it was providing power into it was providing power to a 20 kV grid to power like residential homes and stuff for people who never had power at home. So
That's awesome.
That's great.
yeah, it's cool.
And then what, you just trade paint with their CEO one day? And you're like,
Nah, it was just like it was, that had kind of run its course. And I wanted to get back into the space here and stateside, and MAP was trying to start a mission critical division.
Graham, he had left, to MAP.
Well, he had been at MAP.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And they're based out of what, Louisiana?
Louisiana, had a Dallas office. He was trying to get something going. They hired me to help, get some of the Cyrus work and this and that. So ran a few projects there, underneath the MAP
As a
umbrella,
MAP guy.
at MAP.
And
then Johnny, brought me
Sucked
in
you up.
under the umbrella and said, "Hey, come on, help me do this." So,
yeah, it makes sense.
and then shortly after I joined, 2012.
Back then, what were you guys deploying in terms of capital back in those early days?
So when I started at Cyrus,
Yeah.
2012, we were probably deploying anywhere between $60 to $80 million in capital a year.
How much were you deploying when you left?
I think the last fiscal year when I left in 19 was around 1.4 billion. So
Crazy, huh?
It's amazing.
It was an absolute machine.
They were the biggest. I mean, they were the David versus Goliath story.
It was really cool and fun to be a part of, and you don't, this pod isn't really about me and that or this or that, but
but it's about your story.
Yeah, but when you're inside the machine and you're a part of it, you really don't realize, what the machine looks like or how it's viewed outside of it until you actually take a step back and think about, you know, the 200,000 miles a year that I was flying and all
Sure.
the megawatts built and delivered and all the customers satisfied and all the team members recognition, the vendors, the suppliers, the GCs, everyone like that got kind of catapulted throughout the process of like being a part of that,
built
right?
electrical contract. I mean, like back in those days, you were crowning king on some of the people that were able to do the same type of growth that you guys were doing.
There's a little bit of a ripple effect.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. But listen, you have to own, you know, that like you need those people very much as
It's a tough
as much as they
too.
need
I saw you going through
Yeah.
that tough balance. Remember those days where like you could see that it was weighing heavy on you, because how do you not take what we do personal when we put so much of our life into it, right?
Yeah.
So,
But these are your friends too, first and foremost.
But you have to tell
and you
two of
never,
them they're not going to win.
right.
You know, one you get to make their day, and the other two you have to break their heart, right?
The other piece of that is like you never want to put, and we didn't touch on this, but this is another part of maybe for the story later, is like with this business being as incestuous as it is, I know how that sounds, especially the way your mind works, but like more or less like how close knit everybody is and how friendly everyone is and all the things that go on, you realize like you want everyone to win, right?
Yeah.
Everyone. And not everyone is going to win every project.
Yeah, it's not roses every day, right? Roses and sunshine every day.
I felt bad when you had to break
It's construction.
hearts.
I mean, that's what we're dealing with right now.
There's got to be winners, but there's always losers, right? And you got to deal with that stuff too.
The other part is like you have to have the awareness to be able to if you're in the position to do so, you have to know that you have the ability to put people in situations to make them successful, right? Because there's more opportunity to help people fail than there is for them to help them be successful. And I hate that it's wired that way or the industry's made that way, but by default, like everything's regionalized, like everything just has like a bit of a bubble that it works in and it's delivered in. And if you don't have the awareness to know that, like, listen, like there's a fine line between like giving and helping, like coaching and doing all these things to like help someone be successful. And then you want them to do really well, but you figure out that they're out of their depth.
Yeah.
And if you still,
it's a heartbrt too. When you learn that, you're like, damn.
Right.
Because I wanted them to be successful and they can't in spite of themselves, right?
Right.
It's a really, I find that there's just as much emotion that you have to learn about yourself in the space as you do about the space itself. Would you agree?
Without a doubt.
And like
Without a doubt.
The advice I always give these people that I've had the opportunity to have amazing people that are on my team, and I always tell them, you know, some guys will call me all red ass about one thing or the other. I'm like, listen, try to lead with some empathy and try to view it through their optics. Like, how would you feel in that situation? Right? You know you're going to go break some hearts, or you know you're going to make some lives, and you have to find a way to make sure that when you do those things, you know, there's got to be some. We invest so heavily into these relationships because when people have to suffer that inconvenience, I mean, think about these projects. How many times have you guys been involved with programs where you needed to get done irregardless of the cost? You were committed to getting it done irregardless of the cost, and maybe the margins may have eroded for your end because on his side as an operator, you could miss budget all day long, but you could never miss schedule, right? And on your
Minus safety.
Well, safety is always the number one KPI. Safety, schedule,
I think
cost.
You agree with that, right?
100%.
We're not wavering that, but yeah, cost.
Listen, you don't win if you're on schedule and on budget and you're sending guys home every week in an ambulance. I get that.
Yeah,
but like at the same time,
I just had to throw it out there.
But if we didn't have unlimited budget, we couldn't use Rosendin anyway.
I woke up.
Oh shit! Here we go. Come on now.
No, look, we all know that safety is number one because we're good people. We don't want to see anybody get hurt, but we work in a very dangerous environment.
100%.
Like, I know that I've seen some crazy stuff outside of your own story. I know that you've seen it too, but there was a time where, you know, we were sending people home in an ambulance at least once a month sometimes, and that's the risk you have when you have that volume and velocity that you're deploying.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're on jobs where they're budgeting multiple deaths on a job. That's eerie. just think about that, right?
Scary to think about.
You know,
But that's the reality.
But that's the reality. Is like
Yeah.
what we all do and what we're all involved with. It's no joke. But we have to take ownership of that, and we need to be as proactive as possible when it comes to that.
Yeah. But I think there's something to be said about that emotional commitment you're making to the people that you guys do work with. You guys have amazing relationships with a lot of people that just simply would refuse to let you guys fail if they were underneath your guys' line card or if they were on your guys' page. And the reality is what is it that does that? And how much have you invested into them to be to the point where they're willing to essentially go jump on grenades, right, for each other? And then how has that worked out in the long term, in the sense like there's got to be times in which you did the right thing knowing that there'd be consequences, but it was the right thing to do?
Well, first and foremost, to answer or at least address the first part of your question or comment, it's the only way you're successful.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Period.
I agree.
Right. Getting those people into your canoe, whatever
You got to have
call it, your tent, your canoe, your tribe, whatever, like that's the only way you're successful. All of the success that I've ever experienced professionally to date has come via the people I've surrounded myself with.
Sure.
Both directly and indirectly, right?
That's right.
100%.
Yep.
Right. The other part of that was like, how do you do that? Was that the question?
Yeah. Because it takes a lot of energy.
It's a lot of energy, and it's a lot of decisions. To your point about like the consequences, like doing the right thing isn't always popular.
Sure.
Right. And, making the right decision, or at least the decision you think is the right decision at the time, isn't always the right decision. Right. I'll go back to some of that original commentary that I shared with you that John helped me in terms of my professional development. It really goes down to like trying to take the ability to take the emotional aspect out of it. Right. Like sometimes the person, the people, the company, the product or whatever that you're emotionally tied to isn't always the best solution for the problem you're trying to solve. But your emotion tells you like it is. You have to have the ability or the self-awareness to make the decision at the time of what's right or wrong, or what's going to be the most effective, decision and,
and you have
solution.
to be able to pivot if you made the wrong decision.
But the other part of that is that we haven't touched on and the thing that I didn't really touch on, if we have a few minutes here, is really around the management, right? Like take John out of the equation, whoever, like even above that, like, I was in a position, and again, I'm very fortunate to be in the positions that I've been in, that we were given the autonomy to make a decision, to make a design decision, a construction decision, a delivery decision, and we made the decision without fail. And if we did fail because it was the wrong decision, we were at least given the autonomy to make that decision differently and make it right. Like
without fear of being crucified.
Without fear of being crucified.
Yeah.
Like there's always a consequence. Like there's always going to be a consequence or some type of fallout from going down a rabbit hole or a path or something that at the time you think is like, oh, this is the right decision.
Yeah, your convictions are in question, yeah.
Yeah, whether it's a piece of equipment, whether it's the contractor
means
you
or a
use,
method, yeah.
whatever it is, right? Like you name it, right? There's 1,000 things we could go through. But giving the autonomy, like to make that decision, fail at it, suck at it, be wrong at it, and then, hey, that's fine, go figure it out and redo it and make it right and then make it even better. Like that's a big deal, right? And that is one, that's one situation that I will say that not everyone gets the ability to be put in that situation. Like some people get put into a situation where it's feast or famine, like it's fail or succeed. Like we all in here know, like the only success that's ever come has come from failure.
Sure.
But you have to be in an organization or a part of a group of people or whoever that believes that you have to fail to be successful. And understanding that those failures come with true success, and giving you the rope, the autonomy, the whatever
you
it is you want to
that.
refer to. We needed it. Listen,
Yeah.
we used all of the rope they gave us.
Yeah.
Every
Take a
inch of
number.
it, right?
Take a number.
That's how you win, right?
Oh,
That's how you win.
Anything worth doing is worth overdoing.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
You have to, like Simon Sinek wrote a book once, I think it's called The Infinite Game, and it really goes heavy into this whole part where people hit the maximum level of their productivity or output of production when they know that they are inspired by who they work with or who they work for. They are safe in the environment they work in, like politically, like the way that you were just describing it. You knew that you were going to make mistakes. It's inevitable. And you worked in an environment that cultivated or cultured that and said, it's okay. Let's figure it out together when you do. Don't hide it, because bad news never gets better over time, right? And especially in the environment that you're in, where I would argue that there's not another construction environment that has as much intensity behind the schedules as ours. I could be wrong. You guys could challenge me on that. But go ahead.
That's why we're in
because
this industry, is because it's like you get a taste of that.
Yeah.
And there's no going back.
You miss that once.
There's no going back.
For sure. But if you have that where you could go full throttle like you did, and you stepped up and went full throttle too, you had nothing to lose, right? And you had a guy that you knew that would block and tackle for you in the event of the inevitable, which is at that stage in your career where you were super young and you're quarterback in, you went from 50 to 60 million to incremental growth of, hundreds of $1 million every year over year, just massive growth where you're like, damn, we were barely able to keep up with what we did last year. They want us to do 200 million more, and you're like, how does that work? Well, it only works if you're inspired with who you're working with and who you're working for. You feel safe in the environment, not from the dangers of going home in ambulances, but from the politics of the Game of Thrones. And then you are fulfilled by what you're doing. And if you could do that, you could hit amazing things. Like think about Goliath, was that at the time when you did that program, the largest data center at the fastest rate ever?
At the time, that was in 2016. What I will say again, just to reiterate, how fortunate I was to be in that position, right? Having executives or leadership that realized that being the first at something didn't necessarily mean you were the best at something, right?
Or it didn't come without a cost. Right?
Yeah. And I think that realization and that, known factor of being the fastest, wanting to be the best at everything, comes at a cost, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that, you're the best at everything, at least not the first time you do it. Because if that was easy, everyone would already been doing it that way, right?
Sure.
So you push the envelope. And in order to push that envelope in the way that we wanted to push it and the way I can still continue to want to push it, is you have to have the people, in the boat with you that actually agree and are on board with, hey,
ride or die.
We're gonna
vendors too.
We're gonna be the best.
We were in that boat.
Yeah.
Right?
With you.
Yeah.
Well, think about it. You guys actually, let's be honest. Digital Realty Trust, they wrote the book on this space in the early days. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you guys came along and picked up where they left off and wrote a new playbook.
Yeah.
Right. And there's someone that's trying to pick up where y'all left off at, there's always someone who's trying to be like, how do I uplift this or how do I uplift that? And that's great too. Right. But think about how successful you'd have been if you would have been afraid of getting fired every week.
Right.
It would have been impossible. Same for you. How many times do you throw it all on the line? Right. Right. You guys are releasing.
It would have been devastating.
POs. We have people mobilizing on your sites without POs. I mean,
I didn't do that, but I heard it happens, but I don't know.
Do you smell the bullshit? Do you smell it?
Yeah.
Look at that. Look, man, you were an assassin with those schedules. I don't know what you're talking about, but going back to this. So you were at MAP, Graham. What did he say to you? I mean, we all love Graham. He's one of our favorite people, right? He's one of us, but he's like, hey, listen, dude, stop what you're doing at MAP. Or no, stop. You were at Concept. He goes, stop that. Come over here.
No. So
because MAP wasn't on the scene building data centers.
Not necessarily. Right? I had left Concept and gone and done the job in Africa.
That's right.
And so when I came back, In all honesty, like, you know, it was really more of an opportunity for me to go to
What
work.
made you leave and go take a job in West Africa?
Um,
The food.
I was pretty heavy at the time, so I knew I wasn't going to be
You guys
eating.
got free tapeworms over there?
I knew I wasn't going to be eating much.
No, I know, but I mean,
You know,
just to go.
honestly, I'll be completely honest with you. It was
Paying the rent?
it was a challenge. I
Were
mean,
you
like,
married to Brooke?
oh yeah,
Oh.
same
yeah.
everything.
Okay,
It,
same,
you know,
same.
so it was more of like they so they wanted me to run engineering, procurement, and construction EPC, which is
Yeah.
an old term, right? But like, it was a challenge. Like, oh, like, can you come
It's not
do
that
this?
old of a term.
Well, it's an older term, but like, you know,
Never heard of it.
like I was working with people. Like the customer was from Brazil, the plant was in Africa, the product was from South Korea and Germany. Like it was just like this crazy like puzzle that I got a chance to like be a part of, like helping like put together and then solve for. So I mean, I guess really more than anything, it was the challenge of, can I do this? You know, got the T-shirt, just like the marathon you mentioned earlier. Probably won't do one of those again, but I got the T-shirt, and
It's a good
you
place
know,
to be
it-
from. Shitty place
Oh,
to
I
be.
love it.
you know, you just you keep looking for that next challenge. And I knew, like, the first time I met Graham, I knew working with him would be a challenge. And you know, what they were wanting to do, you know, I was a perfect fit for. They wanted
Yeah, for sure.
they wanted
right place, right time.
they wanted Cyrus One work. They wanted, you know, and it was just a matter of time before, you know, John brought me, you know, under the umbrella of the Cyrus, you know, tent.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So hold on. So at MAP, and then you were there for like a year, and then John sucked you up.
6 months.
Okay, and then
2
you were over there,
projects.
and it was just because I remember I had just moved to Drippin, I think, and I was like, at that time, I had thought about going to work there too, right? So
Yeah.
I got there like a few months after you did.
Yeah.
At MAP?
No.
No, it's
Oh,
Cyrus.
when
oh,
he went
Cyrus.
there.
So he left HP, went to MPS.
Yeah,
I
he was
left-
with-
I
yeah,
like
you went- you
17
went with
days.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I left MAP and went to Cyrus. And then
I
he
was
came.
I worked for Englert, right? So and it wasn't like
Worst boss ever.
well, he's a horrible person. Can we all agree?
Yeah.
Matt's probably one of the coolest people you ever meet. But I, you know, as you guys knew, I mean, I didn't leave there for that. I left because Cyrus was pre-IPO. There was tons of emerging growth there. They were actually investing very heavily into their ability to deliver their product, and it made a lot of sense at that time. And I was young still enough in my career where I'm like, I could fuck up another dozen times and still survive. You know, like I have nothing to lose.
You proved that.
Hold on a second. Let's go back to your story. You were in 3 companies in 1 year. Is that right?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, as you were. As you were.
3 years.
Whatever.
Damn.
You went to public school in Northern Texas. I don't even count the way you do math, probably. But seriously, like he's right. Like, remember one time I vividly remember one time you're like, man, Phil, I thought I had my head up my ass or something. You sent me something. You're like, are you trying to beat me? I was like, yeah. You know, that's one of the blessings you have when you get like cancer or you have a life-changing event. You know, your life-changing event turned on a lot of things inside of you, and you had things that motivated you, and you had a purpose, right? You had a reason why you didn't have to go do all the things you did. You didn't have to, you know, volunteer to learn the things you did.
Yeah, but I listen to you guys too, right? Like, I mean, I may be an asshole of a friend
Slightly.
in some
Maybe.
cases.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. No, I the self-awareness I spoke of, it goes far beyond just managing a team.
Sure.
But I listen to you guys. You know, I've had deep conversations with JT over the years about, you know, Brian and what it's meant to him and his entire family and him professionally and personally. Like,
Sure.
I've had deep conversations with you, like given to causes that are, you know,
Sure.
supportive of,
Yeah.
you know, sarcoma and some of the other stuff that you're about. And look, I mean, you take everything into account, right? Like, just because I haven't experienced one of those or either of those yet doesn't mean I won't. Right. And I don't, at some point you realize, like, do you wait until one of those things happens to
No.
you to make the
No.
decision? Right. So
Learn from your brothers.
learn from your brothers, like we haven't touched on this, but just being aware of your surroundings, right?
Sure.
Like, there's 1,000 things like that if you just listen, they're talking to you. Listen to them, right? You've got 2 ears
Yeah.
and 1 mouth. Listen to what people, listen to the signs, look for them, you know, and take all that into account, right? It'll make you a better person.
I would say this, add to that narrative when you two speak to people, like you touched on it a little bit, like don't let yourself get comfortable. You have to be in an environment where you're never really comfortable. Like when I was at Aligned, right? Shap brought in, he paid a bunch of money to have people come in. If you've never been humbled enough to have a 360 done on you, like I'm sure you have, right? Yeah. So when someone comes in and they evaluate and they interview the people you work for, the people that you work with, and the people that work for you, you get a true up of, there's this image of you have for yourself, and then there's one that they have for you, which is reality, right? And I remember sitting down and I had this guy out of Chicago, and he's a PhD, and he was awesome. He was amazing. And this guy did all the tests, I did all the ink blots and the Holgan, and, I think we were 3-4 months into it before we sat down and started really figuring out how messed up I am. And he was trying to pin me down on what my biggest fear was. And it was like he would fly into town and I would still like...
Oysters.
Yeah, no doubt. Mayonnaise.
Whoa.
But
Easy.
my thing is this, is I remember he's like, finally, he had had enough of me, and he was had enough of my bullshit tap dancing around. And I'm like, okay, my biggest fear is that everyone's going to figure out that I have no idea what I'm doing, and I have no idea how I got here. And he like looked at me, deadpanned me, like waiting for me to see what's next. And then he's like, oh, you're serious? It's like, I'm dead serious. And he's like, oh, I thought you just read, like, there was a book that Neutron Jack wrote, the former Jack Welch, GE. And they had on his like exit interview, I guess, or something like that. They asked him, like, what was your biggest fear? He goes, my biggest fear was every time I walked into that building, they would realize that I had no idea what I was doing. Right. But that's a common thing. Like, I mean, how many times were you over your skis? How many times were you over your skis? Right. I remember when
my whole career.
You are right now, actually. I don't want to say anything, but this is the intervention. But like when I went to Aligned Energy, I remember when I went there, I remember like I was in a hotel in Dallas and you called me. You remember that? You like, look, when I tell people, I'm like, we're like brothers. Well, what does that mean? I'm like, well, like we want to punch each other in the face sometimes like brothers, but we love each other like brothers too. But I'm like, you need those people in your life. Like if you're listening right now and you don't have people in your life that are going to challenge you and fucking call you out and ask you what you're doing and question you why, like if I don't know why I'm doing things, why would you know why I'm doing things? If I don't, like the same thing with our business, like I need my employees to love our company. If they don't, why the heck would our customers love our business, right? So it's no different than how we have to have mentors, peers, and partners in our orbit at all times to keep us humble and to hold us accountable to ourselves, right? And to remind us, like, I don't know if I could even begin to count the number of mistakes I've made, but I have zero regrets, right? Because everything I've done, like I don't learn from anything that I do right. I only learn from the shit I've done wrong. And fortunately for me, I had good mentors that were like, just go out and do it. And if you make a mistake, we'll figure it out. We'll pivot.
And sometimes you never realize what you're doing right until something goes wrong.
It's hard,
right?
Like, yeah. But I remember,
no doubt.
Like you have to, like my advice to every new person, like I've had sit downs with like guys like Hicks and, and I'm like, listen, you're young in your career. You could take big risks right now and recover. And I think a lot of people, I think that the biggest mistake that people have, because like we were lucky, we didn't grow up in a fake world. We grew up in reality. And what I mean by that is, and I'm not trivializing social media, but we didn't have another vehicle that people could kind of like the metaverse, so to speak, that we could dump into and create this false reality of anything. We had to be measured and weighed on everything that we did that was very black and white. There was no...
I mean, we didn't even grow up with dating apps. You had to work for everything.
I know. Can you imagine that?
Oh, jeez, right?
Can you imagine? Like the amount of focus and attention that just robs people from that stuff right now. But the reality is it's the engine under the hood for allows the growth in our space. So I think it's good for business, right? But for us individually, I look at this and go, man, I was able to really have a little bit of time where I didn't have stuff distracting me. I had a lot of focus so I could think about what I needed to be doing. And I was looking for my blind spots and I was looking for like, man, I really dropped the ball today. I wonder if I could, is it possible to mess it up any more than I did today? And then next thing you know, tomorrow would show up and I'd be like, I guess there is. right? But you had to have an environment where you felt safe. And I was fortunate too, where I mean, I've had some of the most amazing people to work for and work with. So I've been lucky, right?
It's self-awareness, man. Like, I mean, honestly, I believe it's self-awareness. It really is. I mean, you think about that. Like, it's having the ability, like, to know that every single day, to use one of your, like, you know, lines, like that someone's going to have your six, right? Like,
Yeah.
you wake up every day, you know that something's going to go wrong. You know that you've got someone on your team that has your six, has your back, and has the ability to help you, like, figure out, like, the issue, you know, and address it and, like, just, like, move forward, right?
Yeah.
Because
The people that have your
That
six,
shit's
though,
gonna happen every day, every week.
sometimes
And-
multiple times a day, even when
yeah.
you think it's not possible.
And just
like,
don't panic and slow. If anything, slow the whole room down. Right? Like, just slow it down, and
or have people in the room that could help slow it down for you. Is what I'm trying to say. Like, for me,
yeah, you need that.
I
Right?
clearly don't get it from you two goons. You guys let
He's
me
like-
make all these
he's like-
mistakes over the last
he's like-
10 years, and you just watched. You guys are supposed to be my friends.
no, we are your friends. But listen, we like
They're sitting there with popcorn.
yeah, we like entertainment.
Watch what this dumbass does.
We
next.
love entertainment too. Like,
Hey, listen, you're not too far from
Oh. Hey, listen, but here's the deal: is we need to have people that have our six that are gonna fucking slap us in the face and be like, "Hey, listen, you're going the wrong path."
Listen,
What the
I've
hell?
been lit up by like a Christmas tree by this guy over here.
Oh, LD.
And you too. Yeah.
that-
Oh, yeah. No doubt. Sometimes Kirk is like, oh, sending me a side note. Oh, this will be fun.
Oh, there's times that some of those.
It's just like,
I was grocery shopping with my daughter once, and you were like calling him out on something because he was like, "I got COVID or something." And you're like, "Suck it up." And he's like, "What?" And he went like both barrels on you, and I was like, "This is gonna get real sporty."
what? Listen, what?
And I'm laughing because we've all. I mean, like, how many times? Like when I say, I'm like, we fight like brothers, right? I mean, like your
Yeah, hell
family
yeah.
fights, right? So
What I will say is, like, if when you talk about the ability, like, to have the hard conversations,
Yeah.
like you're not only ever going to be the one that just gets to ask questions, right?
yeah.
Right.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you guys have questioned me. You guys have,
You pressure
like,
test me all the time.
but I'm saying that's how it goes, and that's how it should be.
I agree.
That's how a relationship works, right? You're never the guy or the girl that's just going to be like, "Oh, listen, I get to ask everybody or question everything they're doing."
Hey.
You get to be questioned.
Brooke might be watching this.
Trust me, I get questioned. I get questioned. Like, but you understand what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
that's the only way it works is if you're willing to take
You gotta
on the
have, like,
questions.
yeah.
Right? Like I said, I have failed more times probably than both of you guys combined. But at the end of the day, like, that's how you get
Sure.
right, you know.
But going back to this, I mean, you're at Cyrus, you're crushing it at Rosen, and you're basically helping quarterback a lion's share of this mission critical stuff because that's when I met you.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you guys are where you're at today. Are there any things in your guys' past that if you could go back and do it different, you would change something? Like, what would you do different?
Honestly,
Like, no good story that we've ever had started by, like, remember when we
I
were
mean,
eating that
listen.
big kale salad and it was amazing and we were playing
I-
it safe?
It
was us always going full throttle.
I really think that the mistakes that I made personally, right, and both in business and in my personal life, right. I mean, those have
That's another podcast.
those have kind of defined. Those
Yeah.
have defined me.
For sure.
And like you said earlier, right? I mean, how much do we learn from those mistakes? And that
It's
just
the only place we learn.
it really is. I mean, and if I wouldn't, I don't know if I would do
Would you
any of
change
it.
anything?
Would I make better decisions?
You'd have probably been a plumber.
now. I mean,
You know,
listen,
the real
I can't
heroes.
say
The real heroes of a construction
Listen,
project.
I've made some pretty horrific decisions in my life. Would
Oh,
I
we know.
do it all over again?
Not personally, but professionally. Like listen, there's not a chance.
Yeah, but let's just talk it. Let's just throw it all on the table. I would probably do a little. I would probably pivot a little bit on the personal side. Professionally, I would have gone all in sooner.
You would have put 2 feet on the gas. And
I would have gone all in sooner.
I'm down with that. Moderation's for cowards. How about you?
You know, I don't know that there's anything necessarily that I would change. You know, It's tough. I think that, I'm still in awe on a regular cadence about the opportunities that I've been given. I was blessed with. I was fortunate to get.
Yeah.
I really don't know that there's like, look,
I mean, let's be honest. You were not really smart enough for those opportunities, right? I mean, like,
hence the reason I'm in awe.
Like, serious, like, they unpin the drill.
you should go get a
napkin
lottery ticket.
from your vest
And let me loose. Let me loose.
Took off your helmet. They're like,
let him
let's
go.
just see what happens.
I think that you just like you look back and you're like, is there any way that I could have actually learned more than I did, like while I was doing what I was doing? Is there a chance that I could have given more people opportunity? Like for me, like I honestly and when I left Cyrus One, to take the year sabbatical or whatever and be with my family and do stuff and whatever. Like I at that time, at that moment, like I didn't feel like I added any more additional benefit to the organization in terms of like what we were trying to do and where I was trying to go professionally.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think that like the growth had stagnated in terms of like where I was, where they were, what we were doing, whatever. And like, maybe that's another pod at some other time, but, I don't know that I would do anything differently. If I could do anything differently, I would just like to think that like, if I would have had the ability to help more people in the position that I was in, I would have. I'd like to think that I helped the most people that I could in the position I was in. But if somebody looks at it in a way and says, listen, like I think you could have done more for people at the time or your tenure, if that is the case and that was possible, I would like to go back and do that.
So you're only capable of doing that to the limitations of how well the business overall was growing. So you were dependent on the amount of revenue, the revenue team, and like Tesh's team was first class, obviously. But the reality is this. Think about this, and you probably don't because you're on the inside looking out. When you deploy, let's just say it's $1 billion a year annually, how many jobs do you think that creates between the labor as well as the manufacturers that are creating equipment, the architects, the engineers, all the tradesmen? So like, I think it's a real true testament to your character in terms of the selflessness in which you're like, how do I do more? But the reality is, I don't know if you could have, right? Because you were fairly evenly, farming out work to the entire ecosystem so that someone had a piece of something. So all boats rise with the tide together. And I think that that's another thing that people probably really appreciated. Now, listen, you were a hammer too, though, right? And you have to do that. But that's another thing that people find is respect. I mean, like, let's be honest, JT, you're a buzzsaw with what you do. But I think that people also know that, like, you're the first person they would call if there was a problem. And no one would, you don't let anybody outwork you, right? So people feel like, okay, he could hammer on me and push me harder and challenge me, but it's not like he's doing it from behind the line. He's doing it from the front.
The spirit.
So let's bring this home in a little bit because time gets away. We do this. This is how we normally talk when we're just sitting around doing our own thing. But there are two final questions I'll have, and then we'll bring this thing home. Is that fair?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. So the questions I would have for you is like, and it's really, they're kind of very similar to the same, but we've heard multiple people in this space talk about the existential threat to this space, which is simply that you can't find enough strong talent to support the growth of this vertical. And, we're doing everything we can with, the Overwatch side by going out and tracking down as many veterans as we can. That's not just because we feel that when you come out of the military, you are, a unique skill set that allows itself to parlay right into this role, responsibility of this industry. But those are selfless people, right? Mm-hmm. These are veterans that, taken an oath once in their life to protect and defend the Constitution up to and including the cost of their life if they have to. And the one thing that the military does do is it teaches us how to learn, right? So you can learn at an accelerated rate. And I think that this space is a better place if we bring more veterans in because, one, it actually provides purpose to veterans, which lowers the suicide rate. But two, there is a unique skill set that you get in the military that comes from a cultural base where the mission and the command come first, not myself, right? So if you have people that are all rowing in the same direction versus figuring out how I could get ahead myself individually, I think that you'll find more productivity out of each organization. My question is to that is, and the reason why I said those things before I asked these questions is, my first question is what would you tell somebody that's not in this space? But like this podcast will go out to all the military bases that we could shove it down into and let them know that when they're leaving, yeah, you could go work for a tech or energy, or you could go work for an automotive industry, or you could go get into this industry that is 22 years old basically and reinvent itself on a quarterly basis, if not monthly. The advice to them is the first question. The second question is to those that have gotten here, and you'd be stunned how many times we host DCAC. I get on stage and I tell people, hey, if I haven't met you, please come talk to me, and people do, and I get to meet people that are like, yeah, I was doing this and we were doing schools or we were doing hospitals or we were doing these things, and now I'm here and I'm like, wow, what a difference of industry. So there's people that we want to adopt and get them interested in this space. The other part is there's people that have gotten here and they don't even know what they're looking down the barrel of. Remember your first year in the data center space? I mean, like, you don't even know where the bathroom's at in a data center, right? So now how do we bring those two things to life? And what would be your advice to those people that have been unconverted and those that have just gotten here and they don't know if this is the right space for them? What would be your advice to them?
Oh, man. You mind if I start?
Go ahead, brother.
Okay. All right, cool. So let me
go ahead.
Let me yeah, go ahead.
Let's go.
You got this? You need two mics?
Yes.
Giddy up, son.
So
Giddy up.
So here's the deal. I mean, there is nothing more. I mean, this is the definition of mission critical.
Sure.
And I just really I look at, so we have a big veteran initiative right now that we're trying to figure out, and it's hard to navigate, and we're working actually with Overwatch on to facilitate this, because we have struggled as a company for years to try to figure out how to get these amazing people into our organization, because I truly feel that those individuals, they fit within our culture and our mission, right? I just think that we do a horrible job as an industry attracting these people and attracting the talent over here.
There's no college degree for, focus on this industry, right? So how do we get these people?
But I mean, we need what we need to do right now. And I'm just thinking, even like, let's just take mission critical. Let's just take construction. Let's just take development, everything that we're doing across the board, right? All three of us, right? I mean, we touch so many facets of the business or of the industry. I mean, we need those individuals who are just hungry,
Humble and smart.
That's right.
Pat Lencioni.
That's right.
And listen, like I just to add on to JT, like what I will say is, like, shameless plug for like Yondr Group. Like,
sure.
Like I had some opportunities to go to work for different companies, but like Yondr Group, like hands down, first choice. Like they are like their relentless commitment to like diversity, inclusion, and thoughtfulness to like everyone in the world that has any like gumption at all, like to learn or want to be better. Obviously veterans like are first and foremost, and everybody like just like that's come as you are, right? Like it's not a master's degree, it's not an MBA, it's none of those. It's the wanting to learn. It's hard. It's hard. It's wanting to be a part of something that's greater than everything else, right? And look, people have to want that, right? But people also that want it have to know that there's a place that they're included, right? And we as an organization, not just Yondr, as an industry, right? Overwatch, Rosendin, Yondr Group, like together, collectively, like we have to be able to send a message, and maybe it's through, casts like this or outlets like this, that where we shed enough light into the darkness of like, hey, listen, like this is where you're welcome.
Yeah.
Right. We welcome you. We want you.
Sure.
This is your next home, right? because we know through all the things that we just talked about, some of the things we laugh about, some of the things we trivialize, whatever it is, like the people that we're referring to, whether it's veterans, whatever it is, like they are the people, the he's and the hers or whoever that make this world, this country so great. And we want you to be a part of something even greater, right? So come help us be the best, right?
And grow their careers.
And grow their careers at the same time, right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think from a Rosendin perspective, we are 1,000% focused on our people.
Sure. And
our culture. I think profitability and success, it'll drive that's all byproduct of happy employees and driven employees and just the right culture. I mean, that's where it's at right now.
Founder of Virgin, right? He's like, take care of your people. The customer doesn't come first.
The rest
people
will come.
do. If you take care of your people will take care of the customer.
Yeah, the one thing that I didn't actually mention, but the one thing that I learned from inception, like, is just being a professional. And like the one thing that as my career kind of progressed was I figured out like very early on, and it's one thing that you guys already know, but like, companies are about people. They are never, ever about a product
or the ideology of that company.
That's it.
And as a craftsman, I mean, my perception was skewed, right? I thought but listen, everything is more commoditized. But listen, even if it's the office or the field, right? If you have people that are inspired to just do better, I mean, it makes a difference. And I think you should feel it you're my customer, right? As a customer, right? I mean, we want that to ripple all the way up to you so that you understand where we're at.
It's just amazing. I mean, like, some get it, some don't, but I'm just like, companies will forever and always be about people, never a product. People that work for other companies only want to work with people from another company, not a company.
Sure.
Right? And the company that we represent or whatever we do is about the people that represent it, and not about the product itself, right? So it
love
sounds
that
trivial.
About our space.
That's what it is. Like,
it's one of the reasons why I love this space. I feel like it's a tribe. It's a community.
It's such a global business, but it's controlled off of so few relationships and trust, right? Yeah. I mean, that's what it is.
So, like, bringing this whole thing final, like, think about this. These are some amazing stories. And I don't know how comfortable you guys felt. Like, I wasn't trying to scratch the paint too hard. I didn't prep you guys at all. I just told you to show up and let's just have a bottle of bourbon.
You only brought one bottle.
I learned that next time I got to bring like multiple bottles of bourbon.
Yeah, let's figure that out next time.
Or Zima, or maybe like a 12-pack of White Claw would wrap this whole meeting up, right? Probably. But what my message is, like, think about this. Like, JT, you're the EVP of Rosendin. What does that mean?
It doesn't mean anything.
No, you have a huge team, right?
It doesn't mean anything.
But what I'm saying is this. You went from card-carrying union electrician at the very smallest of ranks.
I'm still a card-carrying union electrician.
Not at the genius of ranks. Yeah. Don't interrupt me.
All right. Okay.
And then you have quiet. That started at a very, you were working at somebody from a bank turned you on to a phone company that turned you on to the largest, one of the top 5 biggest, and here you are.
I didn't realize you can punch down some Cat 6, so I might bring you over to my house.
See that? Hey, listen,
did you take care of that?
Did you see the bathroom that he remodeled in his house the other day? My first response was like, "What's your rates?"
Are you talking? He used to splice fiber in a manhole.
It's like, listen, I got 2 bathrooms.
Great in dark places.
All right.
My thing is, this industry allows people that are, I started as a UPS service engineer. You started at the bottom. And you guys are both dealing with billions of dollars of what you guys have to deal with and manage, and I've been able to kind of touch a lot of different bases too, right? In this industry, there are companies that will let you grow your wings and do everything you want within it, or you could go find another opportunity within this industry that'll let you kind of go pursue that passion. And I think like this first podcast And we already have a lot of speakers lined up for the next ones to do. But the thing is for this one, I didn't want to get into data centers. This is a data center podcast, but I didn't want to talk about data centers. We have tons of opportunities to talk about all the things that go into sustainability, reliability, and all the other buzzwords that go into data centers. But I wanted to create, again, I didn't think that the industry needed another conference. I thought that it needed a better one, and I don't think the industry needed another podcast. I felt like it simply needed one that was focused on the most important part of our industry, which is how we engage with the people in our industry and how the people that we engage with will become your best friends and have they could have the greatest impact on your lives, right? Like my kids call you guys Uncle LD, Uncle JT, right? So
That's right.
It's a pretty amazing thing that this industry had to offer me that transcends beyond what we do for a living and what we make. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly.
Like
So
when you first started, like you had no sleeve and you had no gray beard. Now you have both.
But you were running.
So talk
marathons.
about
He
transcending.
looks so tough now.
You
I
end
mean,
up
I love
jumping the
it.
trunk still. I know. Listen, and he was 4 feet taller. Remember that? He was like a monster. I don't know what happens. It must be the stress.
Jesus. Yeah.
Oh no. All like this. Pew 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 pew. Hey, I'm so honored that you two were on my first podcast because I think that if we do this right and we could continue to bring on, dynamic people that have really genuine and sincere things to share with our listeners, I think that our listeners will gain knowledge and grow professionally and understand what opportunities await for them in this space. And as a byproduct of that, I think that our vertical will grow and continue to expand, but even at an accelerated rate.
Yeah.
So to that end, salute. Thanks, boys. I love you guys. Thanks for
Salute.
being on this first one. That's right. Hey, listen, when you guys are coming back and doing podcast 50, we're drinking out of nothing but Dixie cups.
Love you guys.
So,
Keep it
salute.
classy,
Thanks, guys. Signing out. Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Podcast number 1 in the books.